Commander Thryel stood at the edge of the shattered atmosphere, observing the planet below, Earth, a name that, for centuries, had been relegated to myth, a ghost story told to young cadets about the dangers of unchecked ambition. To most, Earth was nothing more than a cautionary tale, a distant and forgotten tragedy. To Thryel, however, it was the final puzzle piece in a history that had long been buried beneath layers of superstition and fear. "Commander," the ship's AI interrupted the silence, its tone respectful, yet firm. "We are in position." Thryel's gaze remained fixed on the planet. Earth's surface, as viewed from orbit, was an ugly scar, a battlefield frozen in time. The once blue oceans were gray and stagnant, the landmasses littered with craters from wars whose origins no one truly remembered. But even in its decay, there was something unsettlingly familiar about it. Thryel had seen worlds destroyed before, seen the aftermath of violent conflicts, the charred remains of civilizations that had fought too long and too hard. But none of them felt like this. "Proceed with the descent," Thryel said quietly. The ship began its slow approach, the engines humming softly as it pierced the planet's thin atmosphere. The crew, a mix of species chosen for their resilience and expertise, moved with purpose, but there was an air of tension among them. This wasn't just another mission to a forgotten world. This was Earth. As they passed through the clouds, the full scale of the devastation became clear. Cities, once towering monuments to human ingenuity, lay in ruins, their structures reduced to skeletal remains. Massive warships, now little more than derelict hulks, floated in the stratosphere, casting long shadows over the barren landscape below. There was no sign of life, no movement, no sound, just the remnants of a species that had once believed itself invincible. "Commander," one of the crew members, a scientist from the Thaldor species, approached hesitantly. "The scans show no signs of biological activity, not even microbial life. This planet is dead." Thryel nodded, though the confirmation brought no comfort. That was expected. Humanity's extinction was thorough. The Thaldor scientist hesitated, her 6 limbs shifting nervously. "Do you believe it's true? That they did this to themselves?" Thryel turned to face her, studying her expression. There was a fear there, not just of the desolation below, but of the implications it carried. The Intergalactic Federation had long held humanity as the ultimate cautionary tale, a species that had reached the pinnacle of technological advancement, only to collapse under the weight of its own violence. The stories said they had destroyed themselves in a war so total, so all-consuming, that no one could say what had sparked it, or who had won. "They say we are what we choose to be," Thryel said quietly, his voice tinged with a sadness he couldn't quite place. "But what if some choices are inevitable?" The scientist shifted uncomfortably, glancing back at the ruins below. "The other races, they fear what humanity represents. The idea that a species so advanced could fall so completely. It's not natural." Thryel sighed, returning his gaze to the planet. "Natural or not, it happened, and we are here to understand why." The ship descended further, its landing gear settling softly into the dust of what had once been a city square. The crew, now fully suited and armed, disembarked in silence, their steps heavy with the weight of history. Around them, the ruins stretched for miles in every direction. Broken buildings jutted out from the earth like bones, the wind carrying with it the faint scent of decay, though there was nothing left to decay. "This place," one of the soldiers muttered, his voice barely audible through the comms. "It feels wrong." Thryel agreed, though he said nothing. It wasn't just the absence of life that made Earth feel unnatural. It was something deeper, something buried beneath the surface, an unspoken presence that lingered in the silence. As they moved through the streets, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness, Thryel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Commander," the ship's AI chimed in again. "There is an anomaly nearby, a signal of unknown origin." Thryel paused, frowning. "Unknown? How is that possible?" "The technology appears to be human, but it does not match any known frequencies or patterns from the archived records." Thryel exchanged a glance with the Thaldor scientist. Can you trace it? Affirmative. It is coming from a structure approximately 3 kilometers west of your current location. Thryel motioned for the team to follow. As they moved through the desolate streets, the ruins became more concentrated, the buildings larger and more ornate, though they were just as broken. Statues of long-forgotten leaders stood toppled and shattered, their faces eroded by time. Yet, despite the destruction, there was an undeniable sense of purpose in the design of this place. Even in its ruin, the city spoke of a people who had once believed they were masters of their own destiny. They reached the source of the signal, a massive underground bunker, its entrance sealed by layers of rusted metal and debris. Thryel ordered the team to begin cutting through, though the work was slow and painstaking. "What do you think we'll find down there?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice betraying a hint of unease. Thryel didn't answer immediately. He wasn't sure what to expect. Humanity had left so little behind, just the ruins of their cities and the stories of their downfall. But something about this place, about this signal, felt different. It felt deliberate. The entrance finally gave way with a groaning creak, and the team descended into the darkness below. The air was thick with dust, and the lights from their helmets cast long shadows across the walls. The corridor was lined with machines, some still faintly humming with power, though their purpose was unclear. "This technology is ancient," the Thaldor scientist said, her voice hushed. "And yet, it still functions. How is that possible?" Thryel approached one of the machines, studying its design. It was crude by the standards of the Federation, but there was an elegance to its simplicity. Humans had always been resourceful, if nothing else. "Commander," the AI interrupted again, "I am detecting a large energy source deeper within the facility. It appears to be the origin of the signal." Thryel nodded, motioning for the team to continue. As they ventured further into the bunker, the air grew colder, and the machines became more complex. The corridor opened into a massive chamber, its ceiling towering high above them. At the center of the room stood a single console, its surface D by a faint blue glow. "This is it," the Thaldor scientist whispered. "This is what's been broadcasting the signal." Thryel approached the console cautiously. There were no markings, no indicators of its function. Just a single button, worn and scratched from centuries of neglect. He hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over the button. "Do you think it's wise?" the scientist asked quietly. Thryel didn't respond. Instead, he pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the entire facility seemed to come to life. Lights flickered on, machines whirred into action, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. "Commander," the eye's voice was urgent now, "the signal has changed. It's no longer broadcasting outward. It's activating something." Thryel's heart raced as the realization dawned on him. This wasn't just a relic of a long-dead civilization. This was a trap, and he had just triggered it. The deep hum of the ancient beacon reverberated through the subterranean vault, echoing in ways that felt almost alive. Lights flickered, hazy, disorienting, casting fleeting shadows across the cold, metallic walls. The pulse, a silent command, rippled out from the long-buried machinery, crossing the vast distance between stars, as if it had always been waiting for this precise moment to awaken. And far above, scattered in Earth's desolate orbit, human war satellites blinked to life, their once dormant systems grinding into action. In the vault below, Captain Aria's eyes fluttered open. There was no dream in the frozen stasis, only a long, unyielding dark. The jolt of reawakening was violent. Her body convulsed, every muscle screaming with a sudden return to life. The chamber's walls felt impossibly close, and the cold of centuries clung to her skin. For a moment, she couldn't remember who she was, or why she had been placed here. The only certainty was the pain. The slow realization that her mind was still her own crept in, and with it, memories, fragments of a world that had long ceased to exist. Voices from a time when humanity had not yet become myth. The lock on the stasis pod hissed as it released. Aria fell forward, gasping, her legs trembling beneath her weight. The vault was dimly lit, sterile, the air thick with a metallic tang. She forced herself to stand, leaning against the pod for support. Through blurred vision, she saw the other stasis chambers around her, each one housing a member of her squad, a relic of the war humanity could not forget. A soft, mechanical voice broke the silence. Captain Aria Monroe. Time elapsed, 3,014 years. Full physical and mental systems restoration complete. 3,000 years. The words sank into her mind like stones dropped into still water. How was that possible? Earth was gone, or it was supposed to be. A wasteland. But she was alive. Why? She gripped the edge of her pod tighter, willing her legs to cooperate. Her senses were slowly sharpening, pulling her from the haze of stasis-induced disorientation. And then the memories hit her, not as a gradual trickle, but as a flood. The final days of Earth. The catastrophic collapse. Humanity's decision to gamble everything on their perfection of war. They had become so efficient at killing that it had left them standing on the precipice of extinction. And yet, in some desperate act of hope, or perhaps fear, they had hidden themselves away, buried deep beneath the surface, waiting for a time when the world would forget. But had they? And if they hadn't, why had she been awakened? "Captain, you okay?" The voice was rough, but unmistakable. "Gabriel." She turned slowly, her limbs still heavy, and saw him pulling himself out of his own pod, wincing as he stretched out his arms. Gabriel Grayson was the last person she had spoken to before going under. They had known each other long before they were soldiers. He had always managed to ground her, to give her perspective when she felt as if the weight of their decisions might crush her. And now, more than ever, she needed that. "I'm alive," she replied, her voice raw. His eyes narrowed as he stood, shaking off the stiffness from his muscles. "Alive. Yeah, whatever that means after 3,000 years. There was no room for pleasantries, no space for disbelief. The sobering reality of their situation sank in as the seconds ticked by, thickening the air between them. Aria felt it first, the familiar thrum in the pit of her stomach, the instincts of a soldier stirring to life. Something was wrong. "The beacon," she muttered, her voice low. "What about it?" Gabriel glanced around, taking in the scene. "I'm more concerned about why the hell we're awake. We didn't wake up on our own. Something triggered it." Her words settled over them, heavy with implication. The beacon had been meant as a signal, but not for them. It had been designed to alert the remnants of humanity, those scattered across the stars, that Earth was habitable again. Or, in the darker recesses of her mind, she wondered if it had been triggered by something far less benign. Gabriel crossed his arms, his brow furrowed in thought. "You think we're under attack?" Aria didn't answer immediately. The word attack hung there, and she could feel it gnawing at the edges of her mind. That would have been the logical conclusion, if humanity had any remaining enemies after their long disappearance. But no one had been left to hate them, not after the wars. At least, that's what she had believed. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that their reawakening wasn't by chance. Her gaze shifted to the readouts flickering on the console in the corner, where the AI system monitored the vault. It was a weak echo of its former self, damaged over centuries, but still functional enough to report on the outside world. Aria approached it cautiously. "What are you doing?" Gabriel asked, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly might shatter whatever fragile peace still existed in the room. "Checking the surface." Gabriel watched her in silence. His eyes were still clouded with the disorientation of stasis, but there was no mistaking the wariness in them. He knew as well as she did that whatever they found wouldn't be good. The readouts flickered with static, their signals faint and distant, but one thing was unmistakable. There were signs of life on the surface. Faint, but undeniable. Aria's chest tightened. "We're not alone." Gabriel moved beside her, reading the same lines of data. "Who the hell is it?" "I don't know. Could be scavengers, could be another race. But there's something out there." "Doesn't feel right," he muttered, more to himself than to her. She didn't have the words to respond. In some distant part of her mind, The idea of seeing another living being again was almost a comfort. But that comfort was short-lived. Whoever, or whatever, was out there wasn't human, and humanity had left behind a legacy that most intelligent species would prefer to forget. The console's alert system beeped softly, a warning signal that sent a shiver down her spine. "They're moving toward the vault." Gabriel's face hardened. "We should prepare." She nodded, stepping away from the console. As they moved through the dim vault, her body began to remember the motions of preparation, strapping on the familiar weight of armor, checking the integrity of her weapons. The squad was waking up around them now, one by one, their stasis pods releasing the others into the cold, sterile air. There was no time to explain. Their instincts kicked in as they saw her and Gabriel preparing for what felt like the inevitable. But Aria's mind was elsewhere. The existential weight of their existence pressed on her, a question that refused to remain buried. Why had they been preserved? Why had humanity, after pushing itself to the brink of annihilation, chosen this path? To be frozen, sealed away like relics of a bygone age, waiting to be reawakened in a future they could not predict. She glanced at Gabriel, wondering if he felt it too, the burden of being a part of something larger than themselves, something more monstrous than even they could fully grasp. They weren't just soldiers. They were the remnants of a species that had perfected war to such an extent that it had undone them. He caught her looking and raised an eyebrow. "What? Do you ever wonder if we deserve this?" Gabriel paused, the question hanging between them like a weight neither of them wanted to confront. His face hardened. "Deserve what?" "To be here, to be alive, after everything we've done." He looked away, staring at the floor. "I stopped thinking about that a long time ago. Aria didn't get me anywhere." Her mouth tightened. She had always admired Gabriel's pragmatism, but there were times when she wished he'd allow himself to feel the full weight of what they were. They were more than weapons, more than soldiers. They were the product of humanity's darkest choices. And now, whatever had stirred them awake, it hadn't done so out of kindness. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint hum of the vault's machinery. Then, from far above, a distant rumble. Gabriel straightened, his eyes narrowing. "They're here." Aria nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the beginning of whatever waited for them on the surface. And yet, as she strapped on her helmet and prepared to lead her squad out into the unknown, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real enemy wasn't out there. It was within. Without another word, they moved toward the vault's exit, the weight of their past clinging to them like a shadow that refused to be shaken. And as the ancient doors began to creak open, Aria felt the cold, hollow truth settle into her bones. Humanity had never truly died. It had just been waiting to wake up. And now it had. The cold silence of the underground facility echoed within Captain Aria's mind as her team prepared for the mission ahead. Every action, every breath seemed calculated, methodical, and painfully deliberate. It was not simply the mechanics of war returning to her, but something deeper, something that stretched beyond the practicalities of combat. The weight of their awakening clung to them, shadowing their every movement as they geared up in the dimly lit armory. Gabriel was the first to break the silence, his voice low but sharp. "You ready for this?" Aria's eyes flicked up to meet his. Gabriel's face, though worn from years of slumber, was still as unreadable as it had been when she'd last seen him. His question was simple, but the implications were vast. None of them had asked to return. Their mission, buried in centuries-old protocols, had always been one of necessity, not choice. "I don't think ready matters anymore," Aria replied, strapping a pulse rifle to her shoulder. "It's what we were made for." Gabriel scoffed. "Made for this? Yeah." His fingers brushed against the worn insignia on his own armor, a silent acknowledgement of all that had been lost. "But should we be?" The question lingered in the air, neither rhetorical nor needing an answer. Gabriel turned away, his step steady as he moved toward the exit. Aria followed, her thoughts drifting back to the moments just before Earth's downfall. It was never a clear memory, always fragmented, flashes of destruction, a sky burning with the fire of 1,000 missiles, the unmistakable sensation of helplessness wrapped in cold fury. No matter how much time passed, those final days clung to her mind like a plague she couldn't shake. Her team, 5 soldiers in total, assembled at the entrance of the vault. Their expressions mirrored hers, stern, focused, yet touched by something raw beneath the surface. None of them spoke of it, but the silent weight of awakening, of being dragged from one nightmare into another, was there in every strained breath. Each of them felt the same pulse of disorientation mixed with purpose. They had been cryogenically frozen, preserved as humanity's last line of defense. And now, after millennia of dormancy, they were called back. But what for? Ahead of them lay the task, a surgical strike against what their scanners had identified as an alien reconnaissance team. They were outnumbered, but that had never been an obstacle for human soldiers before. What troubled Aria wasn't the odds, it was the purpose. Were they awakening to carry out the same cycle of violence that had brought humanity to ruin in the first place? As they reached the edge of the vault, the world beyond opened up, a barren, desolate landscape that stretched out in every direction. The ruins of what had once been human civilization lay in the distance, now covered in dust and overgrowth. Yet, despite the decay, the sight of it sparked a deep, unspoken connection to the past. For all its flaws, this land had once been home. Aria's team moved in formation, their steps soundless on the cracked earth. She led the way, scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. Their target, the Thryel reconnaissance unit, was somewhere in the ruins. The Thryel were different from the human adversaries of the past. Aliens, yes, but not invincible. What they lacked in raw power, they made up for in strategy, in patience. They had observed, waited, and now they were here, unaware that humanity had begun to stir once more. The Thryel, to Aria, represented more than just an enemy. They were a reflection of humanity's worst fears, the idea that, despite all their advancements, their legacy was fragile, easily erased. But were they wrong to fight back? That question gnawed at her as they moved. As they approached the designated strike zone, Aria raised her hand, signaling the team to halt. Gabriel knelt beside her, his visor reflecting the distant forms of the Thryel soldiers setting up equipment. "They don't see us," he muttered, his voice tense with anticipation. "We could take them out in one go." Aria hesitated, her eyes locking onto the alien figures. They moved with precision, setting up their instruments, unaware of the shadows creeping upon them. Yet, for some reason, she felt a pang of reluctance. "There's something different about this," she said quietly. Gabriel shot her a confused glance. "Different. This is what we do. We eliminate threats." "Is it?" Her voice was softer now, almost introspective. "Or is it just what we've been programmed to do?" Gabriel frowned, but said nothing. He could sense the change in her, the way her mind had shifted in the wake of their awakening. This wasn't just a mission for her. It was a crossroads, a moment where every action could mean something far greater. The silence was broken by the crack of gunfire. One of the team had taken the shot, a clean, precise hit that dropped one of the Thryel soldiers instantly. Chaos erupted. Aria cursed under her breath, signaling the team to move in. They launched forward with lethal efficiency, their weapons tearing through the Thryel ranks. Yet, amidst the violence, Aria's thoughts raced, questions swirling in her mind. Each shot she fired felt heavier than the last, as if with every trigger pull, a piece of herself was being stripped away. The Thryel fought back, though their methods were no match for the humans' deadly precision. Within minutes, the battlefield was littered with the bodies of the fallen. And yet, as the dust settled, Aria couldn't shake the hollow feeling that had taken root inside her. Gabriel approached, blood spattered across his armor. "Mission accomplished," he said flatly. But there was no victory in his voice, only the cold realization of what they had become once again. Aria stared at the bodies of the Thryel soldiers, her mind distant. These beings, these aliens, they had come to the remains of Earth for a reason. And now they lay dead at her feet, victims of a war that had long since passed its point of necessity. "Is this it?" she muttered, almost to herself. Gabriel gave her a sharp look. What are you talking about? She gestured to the fallen. Them. Us. This endless cycle. Is this what we're destined for? Gabriel sighed, wiping his faceplate with the back of his hand. We're soldiers, Aria. This is what we do. We fight, we kill, we survive. Survive? Aria's voice held a bitter edge. At what cost, though? We weren't brought back to live. We were brought back to destroy. Gabriel's expression hardened. We don't get to choose our purpose. We were built for this, programmed for it, whether we like it or not. Maybe, Aria said, her voice softer now. But does that mean we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes? To become the same monsters that tore the galaxy apart? For a moment, Gabriel said nothing. His silence spoke volumes, though he knew what she was getting at, even if he wasn't ready to face it. The mission had been successful, but the victory felt hollow, incomplete. As they moved through the aftermath, checking for survivors, Aria's gaze fell upon one of the Thryel soldiers, still alive, barely. His breathing was shallow, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and disbelief. He looked up at her, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. In that instant, something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps? Finish it, Gabriel said, stepping up beside her. Aria hesitated. Her pulse rifle was aimed directly at the Thryel's head, her finger hovering over the trigger. But she couldn't do it. Not this time. No, she said quietly, lowering her weapon. Not like this. Gabriel stared at her, bewildered. What the hell are you doing? Aria knelt beside the Thryel soldier, ignoring Gabriel's protests. The alien's eyes widened, his breath coming in ragged gasps. She could see the fear in his gaze, but also something else, hope, maybe? Or was it defiance? We're more than this, Aria said, almost to herself. We have to be. Before Gabriel could argue, she activated her comms. Command, we have a prisoner, preparing for extraction. Gabriel's face twisted in confusion and anger. You can't be serious. This is a mistake. Aria met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Maybe, but it's one I'm willing to make. As the rest of the team prepared to leave, Aria stayed behind for a moment longer, her thoughts swirling. She didn't know why she had spared the Thryel, nor did she fully understand the implications of her choice. All she knew was that, for the first time since their awakening, she had made a decision that wasn't driven by protocol or duty. It was something deeper, a quiet rebellion against the machine she had become. And in that small act of defiance, she felt a glimmer of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Aria paced slowly around the dimly lit chamber where Thryel sat, bound but unbroken. His eyes followed her movements, sharp with an intensity that suggested far more than mere physical pain. The room, hidden beneath layers of reinforced steel and concrete, was a makeshift interrogation site, part of the surviving human fleet's covert base on the abandoned planet they had landed on. Above ground, the echoes of battle had long faded, but the weight of that conflict hung heavily in the air, palpable between them. Neither had spoken for what felt like hours, but the silence wasn't empty. It brimmed with the unspoken, the remnants of the skirmish still fresh in their minds, the stark contrast between the calculated ruthlessness of Aria's squad and the traditional tactics of Thryel's forces. Now, here they were, forced into an unexpected confrontation, not only with each other, but with the questions their battle had stirred. Tell me something, Aria finally said, her voice even but carrying a cold undercurrent. Do you believe your people were justified in trying to wipe us out? Thryel looked up, his reptilian features casting shadows in the dim light. His mandibles twitched slightly as he considered his response. Justified? No. But survival. Survival is its own form of morality. His voice was calm, though beneath it lingered traces of weariness. Aria crossed her arms, her posture a stark contrast to his restrained form. Survival, she echoed softly, her tone almost mocking. Is that what this has been about? The survival of your kind over ours? Thryel's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, his voice rose just slightly. You destroyed worlds. Entire civilizations crumbled under the weight of your wars. The galaxy bled because of humanity. The rest of us had no choice. Your extinction was not vengeance, it was necessity." A sharp silence followed his words. Aria's mind flashed back to her own fractured memories of Earth's fall, the endless barrage of firepower from alien fleets, cities turned to ash, oceans boiling under the pressure of weapons that tore at the fabric of their world. The chaos, the loss, the futility of their resistance, all felt so distant now. And yet, the pain remained close, lodged deep inside her like shrapnel that refused to heal. She could still hear the final broadcast before the world went dark. The last words of humanity's leaders before they disappeared into the annals of galactic history. Another footnote in an endless cycle of rise and fall. But that wasn't the full story. She knew that now. "Is that how they remember us?" Aria asked, her voice softer but no less pointed. "As destroyers? As a threat so great that the only solution was to erase us from existence?" Thryel leaned forward, his bound hands resting on his knees. "The Federation feared you, not just for what you were, but for what you could become. There are ancient records, stories passed down from when humanity first reached into the stars. You were ruthless even then. Your wars, your conquests, they left scars on the galaxy that never healed." He paused, watching her closely, as if searching for something in her expression. "You say you want answers, Aria, but the truth is, you already know. You've seen it yourself. Humanity's violence, it's not just in your history, it's in your nature." For a moment, the words hit her like a blow, but Aria didn't flinch. Instead, she stared at him, considering the weight of his accusation. Was it true? Were they always destined to be like this, machines of war, creatures of destruction, incapable of anything else? Yet, she couldn't fully accept it. Not without understanding why, not without grasping the larger picture that had been hidden from them for so long. The Federation may have deemed humanity too dangerous to let live, but there had to be more to it. Something deeper. "I know you're wrong," she said quietly, shaking her head. "But I can't prove it yet. Not until I understand what happened to us. What really happened." Thryel tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Aria stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Earth didn't just fall because your Federation wanted us gone. There was something else, something hidden from both sides. I need to know the truth." A flicker of recognition passed through Thryel's gaze, but he quickly masked it. "You think you can find some secret that will redeem your kind? That will change the course of this war?" Aria knelt down in front of him, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I know there's more to this than what you or your people have been told. I'm not trying to change the past, Thryel. I'm trying to understand it." Her gaze hardened. "You owe me the truth." Thryel let out a low, hissing breath, his shoulders slumping slightly. "There is no truth, only perspectives. Your kind was doomed the moment it evolved the capacity for destruction on such a scale. The galaxy didn't need to conspire to bring you down. You did that yourselves." Aria's fist clenched, the tension in her body palpable, but she didn't lash out. She wouldn't let his words push her into anger. Instead, she let them wash over her, considering them carefully. It wasn't the first time she had heard someone speak of humanity this way. It likely wouldn't be the last. But as she stood there, staring at Thryel, she felt something shift. This was bigger than their current fight, bigger than the war they found themselves locked in. The real question wasn't whether humanity deserved to be destroyed or not. It was whether they could change, whether they could be something other than the monsters the galaxy believed them to be. Aria let out a slow breath, rising to her feet again. "I've seen enough death, Thryel. Enough destruction. But I also know that there's more to us than violence. You may never believe that. Maybe no one in this galaxy ever will. But that doesn't mean it's not true." For a moment, Thryel said nothing, his gaze fixed on the ground. But when he finally looked up at her, there was something softer in his eyes, something that hinted at the faintest crack in his certainty. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "but even if there is more to you than violence, it won't matter if the rest of the galaxy never gives you the chance to prove it." Aria turned away, walking toward the room's single exit. "We'll make our own chances," she said over her shoulder, "whether the galaxy is ready or not." Hours later, the ship hummed around her as she sat in the cockpit, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars stretched endlessly before her, distant and cold, but full of promise. Somewhere out there, hidden beneath layers of secrecy and lies, was the truth. The truth of what had happened to Earth. The truth of why humanity had been marked for extinction. And perhaps the truth of what they could become. Aria closed her eyes, letting the silence envelop her. She could feel the weight of her choices pressing down on her, but it wasn't an unfamiliar sensation. Ever since she had taken command of her small squad, she had carried the burden of their survival, of their mission. But now it felt different. Now it felt like more than just a fight for survival. It felt like a fight for their very souls. She thought back to the battle, to the way her squad had moved with lethal precision, cutting through Thryel's forces with a ruthlessness that had made even her pause. There had been no hesitation in their actions, no mercy. They had done what needed to be done, and yet, there was a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line, that somewhere in their desperate struggle to survive, they had lost something vital. "Can we ever be more than this?" she murmured to herself, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the cockpit. She didn't have an answer. Not yet. But she knew she had to find one. For her squad. For humanity. For herself. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft beep from the console in front of her. A message. She opened it, her eyes scanning the text quickly. "We've located the data you requested. Coordinates are attached. Be careful. This may be bigger than we anticipated." Aria stared at the message for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. The first step toward uncovering the truth, toward understanding what had happened to Earth, and perhaps toward understanding humanity's place in the universe. She keyed in the coordinates, the ship's engines humming to life around her. As the stars began to blur into streaks of light, Aria felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. Whatever came next, she was ready. Ready to face the truth, no matter how dark it might be. Back in the makeshift interrogation room, Thryel sat alone, his mind racing. He had said more than he intended, revealed more than he should have. But there was something about Aria, something in her determination, her refusal to accept the simple answers, that had shaken him. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to humanity than he had been taught to believe. But even if that were true, it wouldn't change the fact that the galaxy would never forgive them. Never trust them. The ruins of Earth were eerily silent, save for the occasional metallic groan of shifting debris beneath their feet. Aria led her squad through the crumbled remains of a world she had never known but was somehow bound to by an unshakable thread. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the planet's ghost pulled at her boots, whispering truths no one was ready to hear. The silence was deceiving, pregnant with the echoes of a history too cruel to repeat. As the squad navigated the labyrinth of shattered buildings, remnants of humanity's final stand against the galaxy, the weight of their mission pressed down on them. This wasn't about waking soldiers anymore. This was about facing the consequences of a war humanity had started and never truly finished. The relics of battle, shards of twisted metal, charred helmets, and dormant weapon systems, served as reminders that the past was not as distant as they had imagined. Aria halted in front of a massive, half-buried structure. It was unlike the others. Its walls were smooth, unmarred by the same level of destruction that had razed the rest of the city. This place was meant to last. "We're here," she said, voice barely above a whisper. The squad spread out cautiously, weapons at the ready. Each member carried their own burdens, though they never spoke of them. Only Thryel, the alien guide who had joined them, seemed to move with a strange mix of grace and sorrow, as if the weight of his knowledge was a quiet resignation. The doors creaked as Aria pushed them open, revealing a long corridor leading into the heart of the underground facility. The air was dense with a smell of old dust, but beneath it, something sharper lingered. Fear. Inside, the group fanned out, examining the various consoles and data terminals that lined the walls. Whatever had been here once was long gone, wiped clean by the passage of time or by something more deliberate. It didn't take long before they found what they were looking for. Thryel approached one of the consoles and activated it, his long fingers moving across the interface with practiced ease. The screen flickered to life, displaying a map of the facility. Aria and the others gathered around, tension growing with each passing second. "Here," Thryel said, pointing to a large chamber at the far end of the complex. "This is where the AI was housed." Aria's stomach tightened. She had suspected, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill through her. The AI wasn't just a relic of Earth's war, it was the key to everything. The program designed to rebuild humanity in the face of extinction, to transform them into the galaxy's ultimate weapon. The warships hidden beneath the planet's surface were just the beginning. "What do we do with it?" one of her soldiers asked. He was young, his face hardened by the battles they'd already fought since awakening, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. It was a question they were all asking themselves. "Do we shut it down?" Aria asked quietly, though she already knew the answer. The AI was humanity's last hope, their final defiance against a galaxy that had rejected them. But was it right to let it live? To allow humanity to be rebuilt into the very thing the galaxy feared most? Thryel, standing beside her, glanced at her with knowing eyes. His species had been among those who had fought against humanity's rise, but he didn't speak of the past in those terms. For him, it wasn't about hatred or revenge. It was about survival. It had always been about survival. "Destroying the AI would be an act of mercy," Thryel said softly. "But mercy has its consequences." Aria looked at him, her jaw tightening. "And leaving it alive?" Thryel hesitated, his gaze shifting to the map on the screen. "Leaving it alive is a gamble, one that could end the same way as before. Humanity was not meant to be controlled, not by itself, not by others. Your species has always found a way to rise, no matter the cost." The squad members exchanged glances, the tension between them palpable. Some had already made up their minds. Others, like Aria, were still grappling with the weight of the decision. It wasn't just about the AI or the warships buried beneath them. It was about what kind of future they wanted to shape. "Do you really think humanity was the problem?" one of the soldiers, Gabriel, asked. He was older, one of the veterans who had been revived from the early stages of the cryogenic chambers. "Or was it the galaxy that made us into monsters?" Thryel's eyes darkened, a flash of something unreadable crossing his face. "It's not so simple. The galaxy did fear humanity, but that fear was not unfounded. You are a species driven by survival, by the need to dominate, to control. It was your greatest strength and your greatest flaw." "Flaw?" Aria cut in, her voice sharper than she intended. "Or was it a necessity?" Her words hung in the air, and for a moment no one spoke. The question lingered, heavy with the weight of history. What if humanity had been forced into this role? What if their violence was a product of the galaxy's hostility, not an inherent flaw? It was a dangerous thought, one that threatened to unravel everything she had been taught about the war, about humanity's place in the universe. "Maybe it was both," Aria said quietly, breaking the silence. "Maybe we were made into what we are because we had no choice." Thryel watched her closely, his expression unreadable. "And now? Do you still have no choice?" The question pierced through her, cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. She didn't have an answer. Not yet. The group continued their slow trek through the facility, the weight of their discussion still hanging over them. The further they went, the more relics they uncovered, fragments of Earth's long-lost technology, remnants of a time when humanity had stood on the precipice of total annihilation. But the most troubling discovery was the growing evidence that some part of that old world still existed, lurking just beneath the surface. They reached the chamber at the end of the corridor, its doors sealed shut by layers of reinforced steel. Gabriel stepped forward, examining the locking mechanism. "This is military grade," he muttered, shaking his head. "It's going to take a while to break through." Aria nodded, her eyes scanning the walls around them. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her again. If they opened this door, there was no turning back. Whatever lay beyond would change everything. As Gabriel worked on the lock, Aria and Thryel moved to a nearby terminal. Thryel activated it, bringing up the facility's logs. Aria's heart raced as the data scrolled across the screen, detailing the final days of Earth's defense. The logs spoke of desperation, of last-ditch efforts to secure humanity's survival at any cost. The AI had been their final solution, a weapon designed to ensure that humanity would never be truly defeated, no matter how many lives were lost. It wasn't just about winning the war, Aria whispered, her voice barely audible. It was about ensuring that humanity could rise again. They were preparing for a future where we wouldn't just survive, we'd dominate. Thryel nodded, his expression grim. They created something that could outlive them, something that could reshape humanity into the image they believed was necessary for survival. But they didn't consider the cost. Aria stared at the screen, the weight of the revelation sinking in. The AI wasn't just a tool. It was a weapon designed to recreate humanity in the wake of its destruction, to make them stronger, more resilient, perhaps even more ruthless. It wasn't about redemption. It was about control. Gabriel finally cracked the lock, the heavy doors groaning as they slid open. Aria and Thryel exchanged a glance before stepping inside. The chamber beyond was vast, filled with rows upon rows of dormant machines, warships, weapons, and most disturbingly, pods. Cryogenic chambers, just like the ones they had been awoken from. But these were different. These weren't soldiers waiting to be revived for battle. These were something else. Aria approached one of the pods, her fingers brushing the surface. The glass was frosted, but she could make out the faint silhouette of a figure inside. It wasn't human, not entirely. It was something more. "What the hell is this?" Gabriel asked, his voice tense. Thryel's eyes narrowed as he studied the rows of pods. "They're not soldiers. They're hybrids." Aria's breath caught in her throat. "Hybrids of what?" Thryel's expression darkened. "Of humanity and the AI. These aren't just soldiers, they're the next step in evolution." The room fell silent, the gravity of the discovery settling over them like a shroud. This was what the AI had been designed to do. It wasn't just preserving humanity, it was transforming them into something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. "We have to destroy this," Gabriel said, his voice filled with conviction. "We can't let this happen." Aria hesitated, her mind racing. This was the future her ancestors had fought for, the future they had sacrificed everything to create. But was it the right future? She looked at Thryel, searching his face for answers, but all she saw was the same uncertainty that plagued her. There were no easy choices here, no clear path forward. "We need to make a decision," Aria said quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Do we stop this, or do we let it happen?" The silence that followed was deafening, each of them lost in their own thoughts, grappling with the weight of the choice before them. This was the path of no return, and once they made their decision, there would be no going back. The ocean stirred violently, churning under forces unseen by most of the galaxy for millennia. Colossal vessels, their surfaces sleek and gleaming with technology that seemed far too advanced for their age, began to rise from the depths. They ascended slowly, as though unwilling to reveal themselves after so long a slumber. Yet, with each second, the ancient warships broke through the surface, their size defying the imagination. Water cascaded down their sides like waterfalls, and the world seemed to hold its breath in their wake. Aria stood on the observation deck of one such vessel. The Aeon, the largest and most powerful ship in the Ghost Fleet, dwarfed any concept of warship in the Alien Federation. It wasn't just a ship. It was a monument to the forgotten strength of humanity, a reminder of the terror they once commanded. Her hand rested lightly on the smooth, cold metal of the railing, her eyes fixed on the horizon as more ships continued to emerge, their dark forms taking shape against the misty sky. Inside her, a conflict brewed, an inner war far more turbulent than the one about to unfold on the battlefield. Duty demanded she lead them, guide humanity's rebirth, and unleash their forgotten strength. But every fiber of her being recoiled at the prospect. The thought of what would follow, of destruction, of repeating history, haunted her. She had seen too much death, too much hatred. Her thoughts were a storm, but she kept them from surfacing, keeping her expression calm for the crew that now looked to her for direction. "Commander, the fleet is fully operational," said Captain Keller, his voice tinged with awe as he approached her. His uniform was pristine, freshly donned after decades of dormant service, his face etched with the same uncertainty Aria felt. "Every ship reports all systems ready. The Federation won't know what hit them." Aria nodded, but didn't turn. She could feel the tension hanging in the air, the unspoken fears of the crew beneath the surface. They were soldiers, yes, trained for war. But this was a scale none of them had ever imagined. Most had never even been in a real battle. They had prepared, drilled, sharpened themselves like blades in a forge. Yet none had faced the specter of extinction so directly. They had fought to survive for so long. Now, they stood on the precipice of becoming the very thing they feared. Her gaze wandered toward the distant skies, where the alien forces, Thryel's forces, were beginning to organize their defense. She could sense their hesitation, their disbelief at what they were seeing. The aliens had thought Earth was finished, their warriors extinct. To witness this resurgence of power, the ghost fleet itself rising from the seas, was like witnessing the resurrection of a nightmare. "We're the monsters in their eyes now," Aria whispered, more to herself than to Keller. He didn't respond immediately. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more thoughtful. "Maybe we always were. They just forgot." The fleet began to organize, their formation discipline, precise. Ships that hadn't seen the light of day for millennia now moved as though they had never been dormant. It was a sight to behold, a dance of titanic power and unyielding purpose. The Federation's response was already too slow, their fleets too scattered to mount a meaningful defense in time. But there was no satisfaction in this, only dread. "Commander Aria, the Eon awaits your orders," the ship's AI intoned, its voice cool and emotionless. Unlike the others around her, the AI felt no fear, no trepidation at what was to come. It was made for this. Aria's grip tightened on the railing, her mind swirling with the weight of the decision she had to make. She knew what was at stake. This was no mere battle. It was the opening move in a war that would decide the fate of not just humanity, but the galaxy itself. Thryel's forces were merely the first obstacle in a far larger conflict, one that could end in total annihilation if she wasn't careful. Her thoughts turned to the man behind it all, Thryel, the architect of humanity's long exile, the one who had taken everything from them. Somewhere out there, in the chaos of the stars, he watched. He waited. But this time, humanity would not be his prey. As the first wave of alien ships approached the Ghost Fleet's formation, the quiet tension in the command center shattered. "They're engaging," Lieutenant Marlowe called out, his hands flying across the control panel as readouts flickered to life. Multiple hostiles, closing fast. The screen lit up with bright red dots, alien ships swarming like hornets, desperate to halt the human resurgence. But for all their speed, they were outmatched. The Ghost Fleet's ships responded in unison, their weapon systems humming to life with a smoothness that belied their ancient design. It wasn't brute force, it was elegance, efficiency, and purpose built into every movement, every strike. "Shields up," Aria commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding before her. She forced herself to focus, to push the maelstrom of doubts and fears to the back of her mind. The decision was already made. They were committed. From the viewport, she watched as the first wave of alien fighters met the fleet's defense head-on. Energy beams tore through space, bright streaks of death that cut through the vacuum with ruthless precision. The alien ships buckled under the onslaught, exploding in brilliant flashes of light as the human superior firepower cut through their ranks like they weren't even there. Thryel's forces had been unprepared for this, for the sudden shift in power. But that wouldn't last. They would regroup, and when they did, the true battle would begin. Aria glanced at Captain Keller, who was monitoring the battlefield with a practiced eye. "They'll bring reinforcements," he said grimly. "This is just the beginning." She knew he was right. This first strike was a test, a probe to see if humanity had truly returned, or if this was just a fleeting illusion. But the Ghost Fleet was no illusion. It was real, and its power was terrifying. Yet the fear gnawed at her. Could she lead them down this path? Could she become the harbinger of another war, another cycle of destruction? A memory surfaced, unbidden, of her time in the Resistance. The faces of those she had fought alongside, those who had fallen. The promises they had made to each other in the darkness, that when this was over, there would be peace, that they would never allow the cycle to continue. She had believed in that once. Now, standing on the bridge of the Eon, she wondered if it had ever been anything more than a lie they told themselves to sleep at night. "We can't win like this," she murmured, her voice so low it barely registered. But Captain Keller heard it. "What do you mean?" he asked, turning to her with a frown. "Even if we destroy them, Thryel, the Federation, all of them, we'll lose ourselves in the process," she said, her eyes distant. "This isn't victory. This is survival, nothing more." He studied her for a long moment before responding. "Survival is all we've ever known. But maybe this time, we can survive on our terms." She wanted to believe that, desperately. But the weight of the ghost that haunted her, the lives lost, the choices made, hung over her like a shadow. Could she break free from it? Could any of them? The alien forces regrouped, their second wave approaching with greater coordination, their tactics more refined. This time, they weren't just testing the waters, they were coming for blood. "We need to push them back," Aria said, snapping out of her reverie. "Target their command ships. Cut off their leadership." Keller nodded and relayed the order. The Eon and the rest of the fleet responded immediately, focusing their fire on the alien command vessels. The sheer power of the human ships was overwhelming. One by one, the alien ships faltered, their defenses crumbling under the relentless assault. The Federation's forces were on the brink of collapse. But just as it seemed victory was within their grasp, something shifted. The atmosphere in the command center grew thick with unease, a feeling Aria couldn't quite place. She glanced at the tactical display, her brow furrowing as she saw a new formation emerging from the far side of the battlefield. "They're pulling back," Marlowe said, his voice tinged with confusion. "Why would they?" Before he could finish, the tactical display flared with a new signature, a massive ship, far larger than anything they had encountered so far. It was a flagship, the heart of Thryel's fleet, and it was making its presence known. "They're not retreating," Aria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're preparing for their final move." Her heart raced as she stared at the looming ship on the display, its design alien and menacing. It radiated power, its presence a stark reminder that they were not invincible. For all the Ghost Fleet's might, for all their advanced technology, they were still vulnerable. The Eon shuddered as the alien flagship fired its opening salvo, a beam of energy so intense it seemed to tear through space itself. The shields held, but only just. The impact sent a ripple through the ship, and the crew staggered as they felt the weight of the blow. "We can't take another hit like that," Keller warned. Aria's mind raced. They needed a plan, and fast. But as she looked at the crew, at the ships under her command, she felt the crushing weight of responsibility. This was what it meant to lead, to hold the lives of so many in her hands. And the question that burned in her mind, the question she couldn't escape, was whether she could lead them not just to victory, but to something more. As the alien flagship loomed closer, the battle entered its final stage. The Ghost Fleet's guns roared to life once more, their firepower converging on the enemy ship. But this time, Aria wasn't just thinking about survival. She was thinking about the future, about what came next. Could they break the cycle? Could they find another way? The battle raged on, but in her heart, the real war was only just beginning. The bridge was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Outside the reinforced glass that stretched overhead, stars blinked in and out of existence as the Ghost Fleet navigated through the fabric of space. The subtle hum of the engines reverberated through the ship, a constant reminder of the war they could not escape. But for a fleeting moment, the stillness held, as though the universe itself paused, unsure of what to come. Aria stood alone in the observation chamber, her eyes scanning the infinite darkness beyond the ship. She had never truly felt at home among the stars, despite having spent most of her life navigating their treacherous beauty. She had once believed that the vastness of space offered a kind of freedom from the constraints of Earth, from the limitations of humanity's collective imagination. But now, as she faced the grim reality of their situation, it felt more like a cage. The universe was not limitless, not when it came to time. No matter how far they fled, the consequences of their past choices always caught up with them, and that truth weighed heavily on her now. She placed a hand on the cold glass, her thoughts drifting to the countless lives lost under her command. How many more? The question gnawed at her, an ever-present shadow lurking just behind her thoughts. Aria had led the Ghost Fleet into countless battles, each one more brutal than the last, and with every victory, it seemed as though they had only lost a little more of themselves. She wondered now if there was any part of them left to save. Her fingers curled into a fist. No, she couldn't afford to doubt herself. Not now. Gabriel's footsteps echoed in the corridor as he approached. He was always there, always nearby, her steadfast second. But recently, there had been a shift in his demeanor, subtle yet unmistakable. The silent loyalty he had once offered now came tinged with a kind of unease. She could feel his eyes on her more often, feel the weight of his unspoken questions pressing against her resolve. He stopped in the doorway, hesitating for just a moment before stepping into the room. "You've been standing here a long time." Aria didn't turn to face him. "There's a lot to think about." A pause hung between them, a silence Gabriel rarely allowed to linger. "We're about to enter hostile territory. The crew is waiting on your orders. We need a plan." She could hear the edge in his voice, the quiet frustration he had been holding back for days, maybe even weeks. Gabriel had always been pragmatic, laser-focused on survival. He thrived on the simplicity of clear objectives: destroy the enemy, protect the fleet, move forward. Anything beyond that, he left to her. But that approach was beginning to wear thin. She sighed, finally turning to meet his gaze. "What would you have me do, Gabriel?" His eyes narrowed slightly, as if surprised by her question. "We have the means to crush them," he said simply. "We need to act decisively before they regroup. This hesitation, it's—" "Hesitation?" Aria's voice sharpened as she cut him off. "Is that what you think this is?" Gabriel didn't flinch. "We're at war, Aria. Every second we wait, more of our people die. We can't afford to stand still, not when victory is within reach." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment neither spoke. There had been a time when Gabriel's counsel had been the one thing she could rely on, the voice of reason when everything else seemed to fall apart. But now, his certainty only seemed to magnify her doubts. "What does victory even mean, Gabriel?" she asked quietly. "How many more planets do we burn? How many more lives do we take before we've won?" He frowned. "This isn't about morality. It's about survival. We didn't start this war, but we sure as hell have to finish it." "Survival at any cost?" she pressed, her gaze unwavering. "Even if it means we lose what makes us human in the process." Gabriel's face hardened, the tension between them growing palpable. "We're not philosophers, Aria. We're soldiers. And soldiers don't have the luxury of moral debates in the middle of a war." Aria turned back to the window, her reflection barely visible against the backdrop of stars. Is that all they were now? Soldiers? Once, there had been more to humanity's journey into space. Curiosity, exploration, the pursuit of knowledge. They had reached for the stars not just to conquer, but to understand, to find their place in the grand, cosmic order. But somewhere along the way, the quest for supremacy had consumed them, twisting their ideals into something darker, something unrecognizable. And now, standing at the precipice of yet another conflict, Aria found herself questioning everything. Gabriel lingered in the doorway for a moment longer, but when she didn't respond, he turned and left without another word. His absence left a strange stillness in the room, one that Aria welcomed. She needed time to think, to unravel the tangled mess of decisions that lay before her. For so long, she had been driven by the need to protect what remained of their people. After Earth had fallen, after the destruction that had shattered their homeworld, there had been nothing left but the need to survive. That had been her guiding principle. But now, with the weight of their actions pressing down on her, survival felt hollow. Her thoughts drifted back to Earth, to a time before the war, when she had questioned humanity's growing obsession with power. The hunger for dominance had always been there, lurking beneath the surface of their technological advancements, their scientific achievements. But Aria had been one of the few who wondered if there was another way, a path that didn't involve the subjugation of everything they encountered. She remembered the arguments with her father, a decorated military commander who had seen the universe in stark terms of victory and defeat. He had always told her that the universe was cruel, that humanity had no choice but to carve out its place through force. Aria had resisted that idea, clinging to the belief that they could be something more. But now, as she stood on the brink of yet another war, she wondered if he had been right all along. Later, Aria found herself in the small, dimly lit quarters of Thryel, the alien strategist who had become an unlikely ally. Thryel's people had once fought against the humans, but like many others, they had been brought to heel under the banner of Earth's remaining forces. And yet, despite the animosity that had defined their early interactions, Thryel had grown to respect Aria in a way that few of her own kind did. He regarded her with those calm, unblinking eyes, the air between them heavy with unspoken truths. "I feel your struggle," Thryel said, his voice a quiet rumble. "You carry the weight of your people's legacy on your shoulders, but you're not sure if it's worth saving." Aria remained silent, but she didn't deny it. "Your kind," he continued, "is always seeking something: power, knowledge, redemption. It is a cycle that never seems to end." "Do you believe we're doomed to repeat it?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Thryel's expression remained unreadable, his scaled face betraying none of the emotions she had come to associate with human interaction. "I've lived through many cycles of war and peace. I've seen empires rise and fall. The truth is, it's not the wars themselves that define a species, but what they choose to become after." Aria frowned, considering his words. "And what do you think we'll become, if we win this war?" Thryel tilted his head slightly, as though weighing his response. "That depends on whether you believe there's something worth becoming beyond war." Her brow furrowed. Something beyond war. It was an idea she had entertained many times before, but it always seemed to slip away in the face of the brutal realities they faced. Yet now, with the fate of entire worlds hanging in the balance, it seemed more urgent than ever. "Your people," she began slowly, "why did you fight us, in the beginning?" Thryel's eyes flickered briefly with something that might have been amusement. "Why does any species fight? Fear? Survival. The belief that their way is the right way. And do you still believe that?" He paused, his gaze drifting to the stars outside. "I believe that every species has a right to exist, but I've learned that existence comes at a cost. The question is, what price are you willing to pay?" The words struck a chord deep within Aria. She had always known the cost of survival, but now she was beginning to wonder if they had been paying the wrong price all along. Could there be another way? Could they choose something other than destruction? The ghost fleet hummed around them as they prepared for their next move. The alien stronghold loomed ahead, a final bastion of resistance in a galaxy teetering on the brink of collapse. Gabriel had his plan, the crew was ready to follow his lead, and yet Aria hesitated. Standing on the bridge, the weight of the moment pressed down on her, the culmination of everything that had led them here. She could feel the eyes of her crew on her, feel their unspoken questions hanging in the air. They were waiting for her to lead them into battle, to deliver the victory they had been promised. But for the first time in her life, Aria wasn't sure if victory was what they needed. In the silence that followed, she made her decision. "We're not here to destroy," she said, her voice calm but resolute. We're here to find a way forward. And as the Ghost Fleet surged toward the unknown, Aria knew that whatever happened next, the fate of the galaxy would be shaped not by force, but by the choices they made. Choices that could redefine what it meant to be human. The battle for control over the remnants of the Federation had begun with no warning and even less mercy. The Ghost Fleet, long cloaked in the shadow of human vengeance, now emerged from its secretive veil, cutting through alien defenses with an efficiency that rattled even the most hardened veterans of the galactic war. The fleet moved as one, a tightly orchestrated machine of destruction. The attack patterns were precise, the weapons designed for maximum devastation. With every explosion, every planet-side bombardment, the weight of centuries of hatred and loss pressed down on them all. Aria stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by the faint hum of the ship's systems and the steady, rhythmic pulse of the battlefield updates on her holoscreen. Her gaze was fixed, distant, as though she could see beyond the destruction unfolding before her. Behind her, the command crew worked in tense silence, each calculating the next movement, each aware of the carnage they were enabling. From her seat of command, Aria could feel the weight of 1,000,000 souls. The ghosts of Earth, those who had been lost during the cataclysm, cried out in silence, demanding retribution. The unspoken pressure to honor the fallen pushed her forward, but now, with every passing moment, she began to wonder if this was the honor they truly sought. "Target eliminated," a voice cut through the silence. Aria's eyes flickered. One more planet, a core world of the Federation, reduced to ash. "Move on to the next," Gabriel's voice rumbled from the side, filled with grim satisfaction. He had been waiting for this moment since the Federation's destruction of Earth. His cold exterior had always masked his thirst for vengeance, but now, with each passing second, it was beginning to unravel. The command crew hesitated for a moment. Aria's silence stretched, unnoticed by most, but not by Gabriel. "We need to push forward, Commander," he said sharply, stepping closer to her. "They're already reeling. One more push, and we wipe their fleet out entirely." Aria's gaze shifted from the holo display to Gabriel. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, something darker, more driven than ever. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting to erase every last trace of the Federation from existence. She couldn't help but notice the desperation behind it, a need to reclaim something that could never be returned. "This isn't a battle anymore," Aria said quietly, her voice almost lost amid the tension of the room. "It's an extermination." Gabriel's face twisted in anger. "Isn't that what you wanted? They took everything from us, Aria. Everything. This is our chance to finish it once and for all." For a moment, the two of them locked eyes, old friends, comrades, bound by a shared history that stretched back to the early days of the Ghost Fleet. But something had shifted between them. Gabriel's bloodlust, once a tool to channel his pain, had become his identity. And Aria could no longer see where Gabriel the strategist ended, and Gabriel the executioner began. "We can't become them," Aria replied, a quiet fire beneath her words. "If we destroy everything in our path, we're no different than the ones who took Earth from us." Gabriel stepped closer, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. "You've forgotten what this is about. What they did to us. They didn't just destroy our world. They wiped out our people, our history, our future. And you think there's another way forward? This is the only way we guarantee they never hurt anyone again." Aria stared into his eyes, her mind racing. Every word he said echoed what had once been her belief too. But now, as they stood on the precipice of total annihilation, doubt crept into her thoughts like a silent shadow. What would be left of humanity after they finished this war? What would they become? She turned her back on Gabriel, looking once more at the screen displaying the devastation of the last Federation stronghold. The holographic planets flickered with warning signals, their defensive fleets crumbling under the onslaught of human power. Thryel, who had been quietly observing from the shadows, now spoke. His voice was calm, gentle, but filled with an intensity that commanded attention. "Aria," he said, stepping forward, "there's more at stake here than revenge. We're standing at the edge of something far greater than this war. We need to decide what kind of future we're fighting for." Gabriel shot him a glare, but Thryel held his ground. There was an unspoken tension between them, an old rivalry forged in battles long forgotten. While Gabriel had always advocated for action, swift, decisive, and final, Thryel had sought the wisdom in every choice, every battle. Aria felt the weight of their gazes on her, each pulling her in a different direction. And yet, deep down, she knew this decision was hers alone. "We've come too far to stop now," Gabriel growled. "If you let them live, even one of them, they'll rebuild. They'll come after us again, and next time, we won't be able to stop them." "Or," Thryel interjected, "we could be the ones to break the cycle. If we keep going like this, all we're doing is proving that humanity is the perfect killing machine. Is that what you want?" Aria remained silent, her heart pounding in her chest. Every fiber of her being was telling her to finish what they had started. But something deeper, something she couldn't yet name, was tugging at her conscience. A sudden explosion rocked the ship, throwing the command crew off balance. Alarms blared, and the holoscreen flared red with warnings. "Enemy reinforcements incoming," a technician shouted. Gabriel immediately snapped into action, barking orders to the crew. "Redirect all firepower to the new targets. We need to hold the line." The Ghost Fleet swarmed in response, redirecting their forces to meet the incoming threat. But even as the battle intensified, Aria's mind was elsewhere, lost in the depths of the decision that lay before her. Amidst the chaos, she turned back to Thryel. "If we stop now, we'll leave them with the power to strike back." Thryel nodded, his expression somber. "I know. But if we destroy them completely, we may lose something far more important, our humanity." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Aria's hand hovered over the controls, the power to end everything or save it resting in her grasp. She thought of Earth, of her family, her friends, those she had lost. She thought of the Federation and the countless lives they had taken without mercy. And then she thought of the future, of what kind of world they would leave behind if they chose this path of endless destruction. Suddenly, the command deck doors slid open, and a squad of armed soldiers entered, their weapons trained on Gabriel. "What the hell is this?" Gabriel spat, his eyes wide with fury. Aria didn't flinch. Her decision had been made, though the words still burned on her tongue. "We're standing down," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I've given the order to cease the attack." A ripple of shock passed through the room. Gabriel's face twisted in disbelief. "You can't be serious. This is our chance, our only chance to end this once and for all." "I am serious," Aria replied, meeting his gaze with cold determination. "We've already proven that humanity is powerful enough to destroy. Now, we need to prove that we're strong enough to choose not to." Gabriel's fury erupted. "You're going to throw everything away for what? Mercy? Diplomacy? They'll slaughter us the moment we show weakness." The tension in the room reached a breaking point as the soldiers closed in on Gabriel. His eyes darted between them and Aria, his mind calculating his next move. For a moment, it looked as though he would fight, would try to seize control of the ship by force. But then, something shifted in his gaze, a realization, perhaps, that no matter how hard he fought, Aria would not back down. "You're making a mistake," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "And when they come for us, when they kill the last of us, I hope you remember this moment." With that, he turned and stormed out of the command deck, the door slamming shut behind him. Silence fell over the room once more. Aria exhaled slowly, the weight of her decision settling over her like a shroud. She had chosen a path that would leave many questioning her leadership, but she knew in her heart it was the only way forward. Thryel stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You made the right choice, Aria." She didn't respond. Instead, she turned back to the holo display, watching as the battle began to wane, the Ghost Fleet withdrawing from the Federation's worlds. Somewhere in the chaos of the universe, something greater was unfolding, and Aria knew that humanity's future would not be decided by their power to destroy, but by their ability to choose when to stop. As the fleet regrouped and the stars outside the viewport shimmered, Aria realized that they were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something far more complex, something that would test the very core of what it meant to be human. And as they drifted into the unknown, Aria could only hope that the choices they had made would lead them toward a future worth fighting for. The ship felt colder than usual. A stillness hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tension. Aria could sense it, the subtle shift in how her crew moved, how they spoke to her, their eyes avoiding hers just a little too deliberately. It wasn't fear, it was something deeper, something rooted in doubt. But Aria understood that doubt well. She felt it too. After the decision to stand down, to not annihilate the last remnants of the Federation, things had changed. The Ghost Fleet had grown restless. Gabriel, most of all, had made his dissatisfaction clear in every word, every glance. He had stormed out, but his rage lingered, and with each passing hour, it grew more palpable, more dangerous. Aria sat in her quarters, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. They shimmered with a distant indifference, as though mocking her. She had spent her entire life in this war, driven by the memory of Earth's destruction. Every step, every choice, had been about survival, about revenge. And now, at the precipice of victory, she had chosen something else, something less tangible, but, to her, more vital. The idea that humanity could be more than its history. Her hand rested lightly on the edge of the console, the cool surface grounding her in the present. The weight of command, of leading these survivors through the darkness, was pressing down on her with a force she hadn't expected. She had once thought that revenge would ease that burden. Now, she wasn't so sure. The question was no longer about whether she could defeat the Federation. They had already won that battle. It was about what came next. There was a soft chime at the door, interrupting her thoughts. "Enter," she said, her voice steady but laced with the fatigue of command. Thryel stepped in, his figure casting a long shadow in the dim lighting of her quarters. He had always been a silent observer, rarely speaking unless the moment truly called for it. But in these last few days, his presence had become a quiet anchor for her, a reminder that not everyone in the fleet was consumed by bloodlust. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. Aria nodded, though she already knew what this conversation would be about. She had been expecting it. "Things are getting worse," Thryel began, his voice calm but tinged with concern. "Gabriel's been rallying support. There are rumors. Talk of a mutiny." Aria's eyes flickered with acknowledgement, but she remained silent. Gabriel had never been subtle about his intentions, but mutiny? That was different. That was a betrayal she hadn't quite prepared for. "He believes you've lost your way," Thryel continued. "That your decision to spare the Federation makes you weak, unfit to lead." Aria let out a slow breath. "And what do you believe?" Thryel hesitated for a moment, his gaze searching her face. "I believe the decision you made took more strength than any battle we've fought. But I also know that Gabriel is dangerous. He's not thinking clearly, he's blinded by his hatred. If he takes control, everything you've tried to build will collapse." Aria stood, crossing the room to the viewport. The stars felt farther away now, like distant memories that she could no longer grasp. Her reflection stared back at her, and for a moment she barely recognized herself. The war had changed them all, but none more than Gabriel. His rage had consumed him, and she feared there was no coming back from it. "I should have seen this coming," she said softly, more to herself than to Thryel. "He's always been like this, always pushing for more blood, more destruction. I thought he would understand." Thryel stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Gabriel was never going to understand mercy, not after what he's lost, and now he's convinced others to follow him." Aria closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over her like a shroud. She had always known that leadership came with its own set of sacrifices. But this was something different. Gabriel had been her friend, her confidant, her most trusted ally in the darkest of times. And now he was turning against her, leading those she had sworn to protect into rebellion. "What do we do?" Thryel asked quietly, Aria turned back to him, her expression hardening. We confront him. The air in the command center was thick with tension when Aria arrived. It wasn't the usual hum of activity that greeted her, but a muted sense of unease. Eyes shifted as she walked through the room, some lingering on her with uncertainty, others quickly averting their gaze. Gabriel was already there, standing near the tactical display, his arms crossed over his chest. A group of crew members, some of her best officers, stood with him. As Aria approached, Gabriel turned, his face set in a grim expression. There was no warmth there, no trace of the friendship they had once shared, only cold determination. "Aria," he said, his voice carrying a sharp edge, "we need to talk." She stopped a few feet away from him, her posture tense but controlled. "So talk." Gabriel glanced at the others around him, as though drawing strength from their presence. "We can't follow you anymore. Not after what you did." "I made a decision," Aria replied evenly. "One that I believed was best for all of us. The war is over, Gabriel. We've won. There's no need for more bloodshed." Gabriel's jaw clenched, his eyes burning with anger. "No need? They destroyed our home, Aria. They killed billions of our people, and now you're telling me that we're supposed to just let them live, after everything they've done?" Aria held his gaze, refusing to back down. "I'm telling you that if we keep killing, we'll lose ourselves in the process. We've already lost enough." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Gabriel's expression darkened, and for a moment, Aria thought he might strike her then and there. "You've gone soft," he said through gritted teeth. "You're weak, and if you're not willing to do what needs to be done, then you're not fit to lead." The accusation hung between them like a knife. Aria could feel the eyes of the crew on her, watching, waiting to see what she would do. But she didn't falter. "And what about you, Gabriel?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of steel. "Do you think you're fit to lead? To drag us into endless war, until there's nothing left of us, until we're nothing more than the monsters we're fighting against?" Gabriel's eyes flashed with fury. "I'm doing what's necessary. You're the one who's lost sight of that." Aria took a step closer, her voice low and steady. "And what happens when there's no one left to fight? What happens when we've destroyed everything, including ourselves?" Gabriel's fist clenched at his sides, his body trembling with rage. "Enough," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. "You've lost your right to lead. I'm taking control, and anyone who stands with me will have a place in the future of this fleet." There it was. The mutiny she had feared, now laid bare before her. Gabriel was no longer just a comrade, a fellow soldier. He was a threat, one that could not be ignored. Aria glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of the crew. Some of them looked away, unwilling to choose sides. Others stood firmly behind Gabriel, their loyalty to him clear. But there were still those who stood with her, silent but resolute. "I won't let you tear us apart," Aria said quietly, her voice filled with an authority that surprised even her. "This fleet has survived because we've stood together. If you take control, you'll destroy everything we've fought for." Gabriel sneered. "You're too late, Aria. The decision's already been made." In a flash, Gabriel lunged at her, his movement quick and violent. Aria barely had time to react, her instincts kicking in as she sidestepped his attack. The room erupted into chaos as Gabriel's supporters surged forward, weapons drawn. Aria's crew moved to defend her, but the fight was already spiraling out of control. Blaster fire lit up the command center, the sounds of combat drowning out any hope of negotiation. Aria ducked behind a console, her heart pounding as she tried to make sense of the situation. Gabriel's rage had consumed him completely, and now there was no turning back. The Ghost Fleet was tearing itself apart, just as she had feared, and she was at the center of it all. Aria moved quickly, her body reacting on instinct as she dodged another attack. She couldn't afford to think too much, not now. Gabriel was relentless, his attacks fueled by years of anger and betrayal. But Aria had been trained for this. She knew how to survive. Their fight moved across the command center, each blow more desperate than the last. Gabriel's strength was formidable, but Aria's speed and precision kept her just out of his reach. Still, she knew this couldn't last forever. She had to end it, before more lives were lost. With a sudden burst of energy, Aria caught Gabriel off guard, knocking him to the ground. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as she stood over him, her weapon aimed at his chest. Gabriel stared up at her, his breath ragged, his eyes filled with hate. "Do it," he spat. "End it." But Aria hesitated. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, the violence, she couldn't bring herself to kill him. Not like this. Not when there was still a chance, however slim, that he could be saved. "No," she said, lowering her weapon. "I won't become like you." Gabriel's eyes widened in disbelief, but before he could react, Thryel appeared at Aria's side, his expression grim. "It's over, Gabriel," he said quietly. Aria felt the weight of the moment settle over her as she looked down at Gabriel, the man who had once been her closest ally, now reduced to this. The mutiny was over, but the cost had been great. Too great. As the surviving crew members began to regroup, Aria turned away, her mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. Gabriel had been defeated, but the scars of this battle would linger. And as she stared out at the stars once more, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The real fight was yet to come, the fight for humanity's soul. Aria stood at the edge of the observation deck, her eyes locked on the stars beyond the viewport. The faint hum of the ship's systems was the only sound in the stillness, an eerie contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Her thoughts churned with the weight of everything she had seen, everything she had done. Gabriel was gone. His betrayal, his fall, felt like a deep wound, one she wasn't sure would ever heal. Thryel stood a few feet behind her, silent, as if sensing her need for space. He had been a steady presence through the mutiny, his calm logic a counterpoint to the storm of emotions she couldn't quite contain. But even he, with all his wisdom, couldn't provide the answers she sought. This was her burden to carry. She leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass in front of her. The Ghost Fleet, humanity's final weapon, loomed large in her mind. It was more than just a fleet of ships. It was a symbol of everything humanity had become, a testament to their readiness for war, to their relentless pursuit of dominance, no matter the cost. And now it was hers to command, or to destroy. The thought echoed in her mind. She had the power to end it all, to disarm the fleet, to put a stop to the cycle of violence that had consumed her people for generations. But could she? Could she turn her back on everything she had been taught, on the legacy of strength and survival that had defined humanity for so long? "Aria," Thryel said softly, breaking the silence, "you don't have to carry this alone." She didn't turn to face him, but his words cut through the fog of her thoughts. "I know," she said quietly, "but it doesn't change the fact that the choice is mine." Thryel stepped closer, his presence a steadying force. "What you decide will shape the future, not just for us, but for the entire galaxy." She nodded, her gaze still fixed on the stars. "And what future is there for a species that only knows how to destroy?" Thryel didn't answer immediately. He took his time, considering his words carefully. "We are more than the sum of our mistakes. We've survived because of our ability to adapt, to grow. But survival can't be our only goal. If we don't evolve, if we don't change, then what are we really fighting for?" Aria exhaled slowly, her breath shallow. "I was taught that survival is the only thing that matters, that the universe is a brutal place, and we have to be just as brutal to survive in it." Thryel stepped closer, his voice low and thoughtful. "And perhaps that was true once. But the universe isn't just brutality. It's vast. It's full of possibilities we haven't even begun to understand. There has to be more to our existence than constant war." Aria finally turned to face him, her eyes filled with conflict. "What if you're wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if peace makes us weak? What if we disarm, and the galaxy destroys us for it?" Thryel met her gaze evenly. And what if we're stronger because of it? What if peace is the only thing that can save us from ourselves? The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Aria felt the weight of his words settle into her bones, but it didn't bring her any closer to a decision. She had always been a soldier, always known her purpose. But now, standing at this crossroads, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. Aria, Thryel said, his voice softer now, this is about more than just the Ghost Fleet. It's about what kind of future you want for humanity. For yourself. You don't have to make the same choices that led us here. She turned back to the stars, her thoughts racing. Thryel was right. This wasn't just about the fleet. It was about everything, about the kind of leader she wanted to be, the kind of future she wanted to build. And yet, the fear of what might come next gnawed at her. She had seen what happened to those who let their guard down, who believed in peace only to be crushed by the harsh reality of the universe. But she had also seen the cost of endless war. The lives lost, the worlds destroyed, the souls broken by violence. How many more sacrifices could she justify in the name of survival? A quiet chime interrupted her thoughts. The sound was followed by a soft, mechanical voice, the voice of the Ghost Fleet's AI. Commander Aria, the AI intoned, its tone neutral, devoid of any emotion. The fleet is awaiting your orders. The systems are fully operational. All weapons are at your disposal. Aria's heart pounded in her chest as she closed her eyes, the enormity of the decision before her pressing down like a physical weight. She could feel Thryel's eyes on her, waiting, hoping. And she could feel the cold presence of the AI, ready to carry out whatever command she gave. But in that moment, something deeper stirred within her. A memory, faint and distant, from a time long before the war had consumed her life. She was a child, standing on a hill overlooking a vast green field, the wind in her hair. Her father stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, pointing to the horizon. One day, Aria, he had said, his voice warm and full of hope. This will all be yours, and you'll have the power to change everything. She had smiled then, not fully understanding the weight of his words. But now, standing at the precipice of that moment, she understood. The power to change everything. Her eyes snapped open, and she turned to the console in front of her. The Ghost Fleet, with all its destructive potential, was waiting. But it didn't have to be a weapon. It didn't have to be the end of everything. She pressed a series of buttons on the console, her hands steady despite the turmoil within her. Fleet AI, she said, her voice clear and strong. Disarm all weapons. Stand down from combat readiness. The AI paused, its mechanical voice processing the command. Are you certain, Commander? This action will leave the fleet vulnerable. I'm certain, Aria said, her voice unwavering. Execute the command. There was a brief hesitation, and then the soft hum of the ship's system shifted, signaling the disarmament of the fleet. The weapons, once poised to strike, were now silent. Aria exhaled, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing. It wasn't over, far from it. But for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there was another way forward. Thryel stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You've made your choice. Aria nodded, her eyes meeting his. I have, but it's only the beginning. As if on cue, the ship's comm system crackled to life. A familiar voice, cold and authoritative, filled the room. It was the voice of the Federation's leaders, the ones who had sent her on this mission, the ones who still believed in the old ways of power and domination. Commander Aria, the voice said, laced with thinly veiled anger. We've detected the disarmament of the Ghost Fleet. This is a direct violation of your orders. You will explain yourself immediately. Aria felt a surge of defiance rise within her. She had spent too long following orders, too long sacrificing everything in the name of survival. But now, standing at this pivotal moment, she realized that her loyalty wasn't to the Federation. It was to something greater, to humanity, to the future they could build. She stepped forward, her hand hovering over the comms panel. This is Commander Aria, she said, her voice firm. I've made my decision. The Ghost Fleet will no longer be a weapon of destruction. There was a pause on the other end, the silence heavy with disbelief. And then the voice returned, colder than before. You've sealed your fate, Aria. You will be hunted for this. The Federation will not stand for disobedience. Aria's heart pounded, but she didn't waver. Then let them come. I'm done fighting for a future that only brings death. She cut the transmission, the room falling into silence once more. Thryel stepped closer, his expression softening as he looked at her. You've chosen a hard path, Aria. I know, she said quietly, but it's the only one that makes sense. As she stared out at the stars, the weight of her choice settled over her. She had disarmed the Ghost Fleet, but the real battle was only beginning, the battle to forge a new future, one free from the cycle of violence and destruction. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of clarity, of purpose. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't face it alone. And whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. The stars stretched out before her, vast and infinite, a reminder of the endless possibilities that still remained. And for the first time, Aria allowed herself to hope. As the remnants of humanity's once great military force, the Ghost Fleet loomed ominously in the void of space, its massive vessels glinting under distant stars. A quiet tension hung in the air, thick and charged, as Aria surveyed her fleet. The shadows of war hung heavily over her, a constant reminder of the choices that lay ahead. She stood on the command deck, her heart racing not with adrenaline, but with the weight of impending decisions that could define the fate of two species. Thryel, the alien commander who had become an unlikely ally, was beside her. The juxtaposition of their forms, his sleek, elongated body against her more robust human stature, spoke volumes about the barriers they had begun to bridge. Yet, even as they fought side by side, the specter of distrust loomed. Thryel's people had long feared humanity, and for good reason. Would they truly embrace this alliance, or was it merely a temporary truce born from mutual necessity? Aria, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. We must prepare for their assault. They won't understand your intentions. They will see only the Ghost Fleet as a threat. Do you think I'm ready? Aria replied, her gaze locked on the view screen, where the alien Federation ships began to form a menacing formation. To face them with peace in my heart while we stand poised for battle. He met her gaze, a depth of understanding reflected in his luminous eyes. It's not about readiness. It's about resolve. You must be the bridge between our worlds. They need to see your choice, even if they don't want to hear it. In that moment, the enormity of her position hit her like a wave. They were not just on the brink of battle, they were teetering on the edge of history itself. Would humanity be defined by its violent past, or could it forge a new legacy, one of understanding and cooperation? As the first volley of laser fire erupted from the approaching Federation ships, Aria felt the familiar surge of instinctual command flood through her. All hands, battle stations, she shouted, her voice slicing through the tense air. Her crew sprang into action, adrenaline coursing through their veins. With every ship that answered her call, she felt a mix of pride and dread. The Ghost Fleet was her people's last chance for redemption, but it was also a symbol of their past horrors. Each vessel was a ghost of the wars fought, a reminder of the destruction they had wrought upon the galaxy. As the vessels maneuvered into formation, a kaleidoscope of memories flashed through her mind, images of Earth in flames, the cries of innocence lost to the very war machines they now operated. Aria, focus, Thryel's voice broke through her reverie. You need to command the fleet, not dwell in memories. Right, she replied, pulling herself back to the present. Let's engage them. Maintain defensive positions, and prepare to transmit my message for peace. The first shots were fired, bright streaks the dark expanse of space. The Ghost Fleet responded with brutal efficiency. Turrets rotated, and powerful beams of energy lashed out, striking the Federation ships. The chaos of battle was a violent dance, a terrible beauty of destruction unfolding before them. Thryel piloted his ship with remarkable skill, deftly avoiding incoming fire while returning shots with precision. Aria watched him, a mix of admiration and frustration simmering within her. His resolve was admirable, but it also forced her to confront her own hesitations. Would her desire for peace be perceived as weakness in the heat of battle? "Don't hesitate," Thryel urged during a brief lull in combat. "Show them that we are more than just weapons, that you are more than just a soldier." "I know what I must do," she replied, though doubt crept into her mind. How could she balance the instinct to fight with her yearning for peace? In the midst of the tumult, the Federation ships closed in, their weapons poised for another strike. The bridge vibrated as explosions rocked nearby vessels, sending shockwaves through the crew. "Aria, they're not stopping," one of her officers shouted, urgency spilling into his tone. "I know," she snapped back, then softened her voice. "We can't let this spiral into complete destruction. We have to hold our fire unless absolutely necessary." The crew exchanged glances, uncertainty etched across their faces. The directive was unconventional, and it threatened their survival. "But Captain," one officer protested, "if we don't retaliate, we risk losing everything." "Maybe that's the point," she countered, feeling the tension coil tighter within her. "If we keep fighting like this, we'll never find a way out of this cycle. We have to show them something different." The words were barely out of her mouth when another volley of shots erupted, ripping through the hull of a nearby ship. Aria's heart raced as she watched the devastation unfold. It was all too real, a reminder of the countless lives extinguished in the name of war. "Transmitting my message now," Aria commanded, her voice resolute. She tapped into the ship's communication systems, her heart pounding as she prepared to convey her truth to the Federation. "This is Captain Aria of the Ghost Fleet. We do not wish for war. We seek peace, but we will defend ourselves." A moment of silence enveloped her, a breath suspended in time. The words echoed through the comms, reverberating against the steel of her resolve. She hoped that the message would reach even the hearts hardened by fear. "Aria," Thryel said, his expression grave, "they might not listen." "I have to believe they will," she replied, her determination igniting anew. "If I don't, then what's the point of this fight? What's the point of my life?" In that instant, the tide of battle shifted as the Federation ships hesitated, unsure how to respond to a call for peace amidst the chaos. Yet the momentary lull was fleeting. They were still facing a threat, and instinct took over. Aria braced herself for what would come next. Then, the Federation leader's ship emerged from the ranks, a massive flagship adorned with symbols of power and dominion. It maneuvered closer, its weapons primed and ready. As it bore down on her position, Aria could feel the weight of its presence, a reminder of the alien leadership that had long governed their fate. "Aria," Thryel warned, "they're coming for you." "Maintain your position," she barked, her voice steady despite the rising panic within. "Prepare to defend if necessary." As the flagship loomed larger, the Federation leader's voice boomed through the comm system, booming with authority. "This is Admiral Keller of the Galactic Federation. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Surrender now, or face total annihilation." The sheer audacity of his demands sent a surge of anger through Aria. "I refuse to surrender," she declared, her voice echoing through the bridge. "I will not be another victim of violence. We are here for peace." "Peace?" Keller scoffed, disbelief lacing his tone. "You speak of peace while wielding weapons meant to destroy? You are a relic of a bygone era, one that the galaxy can no longer tolerate." "Perhaps," Aria replied, her resolve hardening. "But we have a choice. We can either perpetuate this cycle of hatred, or we can find a way to build something new together. You've only seen the ghost of our past. Let us show you who we can be." The silence that followed felt weighty, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Keller's expression faltered, momentarily revealing the uncertainty beneath his bravado. "You think I'll take your word for it? Your people have wrought havoc across the galaxy. You have shown nothing but violence. And yet, here I stand, offering a chance for redemption," she countered, the intensity of her words piercing the air. We could choose to end this senseless war, to break the cycle that has defined us for too long. Words alone won't change a lifetime of actions, he retorted, frustration evident in his voice. You cannot expect me to trust you or your kind. Trust is earned, not given, Thryel interjected, stepping forward beside Aria. But perhaps we can start by setting aside our weapons and finding common ground. Calor's gaze shifted between them, weighing their words against the backdrop of chaos. The tension was palpable, a fragile thread stretching taut between two vastly different worlds. And if I refuse, he asked, voice low and dangerous, then you risk losing not just the Ghost Fleet, but the chance for peace among our peoples, Aria replied, her heart racing. A victory through destruction is hollow. Is this truly the legacy you wish to leave? With that, the battlefield fell silent. The Federation ships halted, poised for conflict, while the Ghost Fleet awaited its captain's next command. In that suspended moment, the weight of countless lives hung in the balance. Calor's hesitation was palpable, the tension between them thickening with every passing second. He looked to his crew, seeking confirmation, but the uncertainty in their eyes mirrored his own. Aria took a breath, a quiet resolve settling in her core. This is a chance to rewrite our histories, to step away from the brink. I am prepared to disarm my fleet if you will do the same. We can show the galaxy that we are capable of something greater than war. Calor's eyes narrowed, the weight of history pressing down on him. You would risk everything on a hope? Yes, she affirmed, her voice unwavering. Because the alternative is a future defined by destruction. We owe it to ourselves, and to those who have suffered, to strive for something better. The silence stretched, an echo of possibilities hanging in the air. Then, a flicker of something in Calor's expression, perhaps recognition, perhaps fear, shifted as he pondered her words. Very well, he said slowly, almost reluctantly. But know this, if you betray this chance, we will not hesitate to annihilate what remains of your fleet. I wouldn't expect anything less, Aria replied, the intensity of the moment leaving her breathless. Now let's show them what it means to embrace peace. As the fleet began to disarm, the tension still lingered like smoke from a distant fire. Aria's heart raced, uncertain if this was truly the turning point they had sought, or simply another illusion on the road to despair. Yet in that moment, she felt something shift, not just in the dynamics of the fleet, but within herself. It was a choice, a deliberate step toward a future unwritten. The ghosts of her past would no longer dictate her actions. Together with Thryel and the Federation, they could forge a new path, one built on understanding rather than vengeance. And as the ships floated in the stillness of space, a sense of possibility began to unfurl, delicate yet resolute, setting the stage for the battles still to come. The weight of impending decisions bore down on Aria like the gravity of a collapsing star. As she stood on the bridge of the Ghost Fleet's flagship, the vastness of space enveloped her, but within that expanse, she felt profoundly confined. Memories, ghosts of humanity's past, floated around her like the distant stars, some bright with hope, others darkened by regret. Is this what it comes to? She whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Her voice trembled slightly, echoing in the silent chamber. It was a question that had reverberated through her thoughts for countless hours. The echoes of history were relentless, filling her mind with scenes of conflict and despair. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the Federation fleet suspended in a standoff, their weapons primed yet held at bay. The tension was tangible, a taut string ready to snap. Each ship, a representation of her own species' hubris, loomed over her, demanding a reckoning. Aria, Thryel's voice broke through her reverie, filled with a calm urgency that drew her back to the present. He stood beside her, his eyes reflecting the starlight with an intensity that made her feel seen. This is your moment. You must decide what legacy you wish to leave. His presence was grounding, yet it also ignited a whirlwind of emotions within her. She turned to him, searching his expression for answers that felt impossibly elusive. What if I fail? She asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. What if my choice leads to more destruction? Thryel stepped closer, the unspoken bond between them shimmering in the charged atmosphere. Then we will face that together. But you cannot choose fear. You must choose hope. His words hung in the air, heavy with significance. Hope, she echoed, letting the word linger on her tongue. It felt like a fragile promise, one that had been trampled under the weight of human actions for far too long. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that her choices were entwined with the fate of many, both human and alien. The thought was both a burden and a source of strength. With a deep breath, Aria steeled herself. She recalled the countless faces of those lost to war, friends, families, innocents caught in the crossfire of conflict. They were ghosts that haunted her, but also a motivation to strive for something better. If I'm to be a leader, I must show them that peace is worth fighting for. Thryel nodded, the respect in his gaze evident. Then let us show them. Let us lead by example. As the reality of the situation sank in, Aria felt a chill run down her spine. The cost of peace weighed heavily upon her. The lives she sought to protect were still raw with a desire for vengeance. She could sense the unrest among her crew. Dissent was a whisper in the shadows, growing louder with each passing moment. "Captain," one of her officers interrupted, hesitance coating his voice. "I understand your intentions, but morale is wavering. They want to know if we're really going to stand down. Some feel betrayed." The implications of his words struck deep. She had drawn a line in the sand, and now, as the tide of conflict rose, it threatened to wash away her authority. "I need to address them," she stated, her voice regaining its firmness. "They deserve to know our true intentions." She stepped away from Thryel and moved toward the command platform, where her crew gathered in anxious silence. The weight of their expectations pressed down on her, and for a fleeting moment she felt the full force of her vulnerability. These were the men and women who had fought beside her, who had risked everything in the name of survival. Could she truly ask them to abandon the only path they had known? "Listen to me," she began, her voice steady despite the tumult within. "I know this is a confusing time. The Federation may not trust us, and some among you may question our decision to stand down. But I promise you, this is not an act of cowardice. This is an act of courage." Aria's words hung in the air, silence enveloping the room as her crew absorbed her plea. She continued, "For too long, we have allowed hatred to dictate our actions. We've let the past control our futures. Today, we stand on the precipice of change. If we truly wish to honor those we've lost, we must seek to build rather than destroy." Her voice faltered momentarily as she glanced at Thryel. He offered her a reassuring nod, reminding her of the shared mission that bound them together. Drawing strength from that connection, she pressed on. "I know the risks. The path I'm asking you to follow is fraught with uncertainty, but I believe that peace is possible. If we are to be more than mere relics of war, we must take this leap together." The tension in the room felt electric, each breath held in collective anticipation. Aria could see the struggle in their eyes, the desire for revenge warring with the hope for something more. "I am asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to believe that we can forge a new legacy, one built on understanding rather than destruction." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Aria felt her heart quicken. This was her moment to reveal the depth of her conviction. But make no mistake, this will not be easy. The cost of peace is steep, and I will stand at the forefront of this battle. I am prepared to sacrifice everything for this cause, even my own life if it comes to that. Thryel stepped forward, his voice resonating with unwavering conviction. "We stand together in this, and we will not falter. Your sacrifice will not be in vain, but rather a beacon for a brighter future. If we wish to change the course of our fates, we must act now." As Thryel's words settled over them, Aria felt the shift in energy. The crew's expressions began to change, doubt replaced by a tentative flicker of hope. She sensed a newfound determination swirling in the air, a collective resolve beginning to coalesce. But the weight of dissent still loomed. From the back of the crowd, a voice broke through the silence. "And if they attack us anyway? What then? We'll be slaughtered without a fight." The words cut through the atmosphere like a knife. Aria felt the tension spike, eyes turning to her, waiting for her response. "Then we fight. But we fight for something greater than revenge. We fight for a future where our children can look to the stars without fear." That sentiment hung heavy in the air. The prospect of a future untainted by bloodshed began to take root in the hearts of those who listened. Aria could see it, a fragile seed of hope beginning to bloom. But doubt still lingered, and the specter of violence was not easily dispelled. As she stepped down from the platform, Aria knew she had given them a choice, but the burden was far from lifted. The Federation fleet was still poised to strike, and her people remained on edge. She could feel the tension thrumming like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. "Aria," Thryel said softly, drawing her aside, away from prying eyes. "You must remain vigilant. Not all will embrace this path." "I know," she replied, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily upon her. "But I can't let fear dictate my actions. If we want peace, we have to be willing to show that we mean it, even when it feels impossible." "And what if that means risking everything?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then I will pay that price," she affirmed, feeling the conviction swell within her. "I'd rather die knowing I tried to change the course of history than live in a world defined by hatred." Their eyes locked, and for a brief moment she felt an understanding pass between them, a mutual recognition of sacrifice, the unspoken bond that had grown from the ashes of conflict. It was a connection deeper than words, forged in the crucible of shared struggles. The atmosphere thickened as the seconds stretched into eternity. The Federation ships loomed just beyond the viewport, a constant reminder of the battle yet to come. Aria knew that dissent simmered within her ranks, that not all would follow her lead. But she also knew that this was the only way forward, even if it meant standing alone. "Prepare to transmit my final message to the Federation," she said, a steely resolve returning to her voice. It's time they understood the cost of peace. As she returned to the command platform, the room fell silent once more. The crew gathered, their faces reflecting a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. Aria's heart pounded, each beat resonating with the gravity of the moment. "Admiral Keller," she began, her voice steady. "I am Captain Aria of the Ghost Fleet. We are prepared to stand down and seek a path toward peace. I request a direct line of communication." The silence stretched as they awaited a response, tension coiling tighter within the room. Finally, Keller's voice broke through the calm system, resonating with an authority that commanded attention. "Captain Aria, your proposal is unorthodox. We have witnessed the destruction your kind can unleash. Why should we trust you now?" "Because I'm asking for a chance," she replied, feeling the weight of every word. "A chance to build something better, for both our peoples. I know the history that haunts us, but we cannot let it dictate our future." The silence on the other end of the line felt suffocating, an oppressive weight pressing down on them. She could almost sense Keller's hesitation, the internal conflict that mirrored her own. "What guarantees can you provide?" he finally demanded, skepticism dripping from his words. "The only guarantee I can offer is my life," she said, each syllable heavy with conviction. "If I betray this promise, if I allow violence to flourish once more, you have my word that I will pay the price." Keller's response came slowly, each word considered. "You understand the implications of this decision? The cost of peace is not simply your life. It is the lives of those who have suffered at your hands." "I understand," she replied, her voice unwavering, "and I carry that burden every day. But if we truly wish to honor those lost, we must seek redemption, not revenge." The comms crackled as Keller considered her words. "Very well, Captain Aria. We will hold our fire, but know this: the moment you betray our trust, we will respond with force. The lives of your crew rest on your shoulders." "Thank you," she said, relief flooding through her, though it was tempered by the weight of his warning. "We will honor this chance." As the communication ended, Aria turned to face her crew. The silence was thick with unspoken words, but she could feel a shift, a glimmer of hope beginning to take root. It was a fragile thing, but it was there, nestled within the uncertainty. "Prepare to stand down," she ordered, the command issuing forth from a place of conviction. "We will show them that humanity can choose a different path." As her crew began to carry out her orders, a mix of emotions washed over her: fear, hope, and determination intertwined like threads in a complex tapestry. Aria understood the risk they were taking, but she also knew that the cost of peace was a burden she was willing to bear. And in that moment, as the Ghost Fleet prepared to lower its defenses, she felt the enormity of their choice resonate within her. This was not merely a battle for survival, it was a chance to reshape the future. A chance to redefine what it meant to be human. The stars outside shimmered like distant memories, each one a testament to the possibilities that lay ahead. The tension that had gripped her began to loosen, if only slightly, as they embarked on this uncertain journey. Together, they would face whatever came next, whether it was peace or war, life or death. The path was unwritten, but in that moment, Aria felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could carve out a future worth fighting for. As she stepped back from the command platform, she found Thryel waiting for her, his expression a blend of pride and concern. "You did well," he said, his voice warm. "You stood firm in your beliefs, even when the odds seemed insurmountable." "I only hope it's enough," she replied, feeling the weight of uncertainty still lingering. "This is just the beginning. The real test lies ahead." "Then let us face it together," he said, offering his hand as a gesture of solidarity. With a nod, she took his hand, their fingers intertwining in a silent promise. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they were no longer alone. Together, they would confront whatever fate awaited them, one step at a time, with hope guiding their way. As the Ghost Fleet drifted through the quiet void of space, a palpable shift lingered in the air, a fragile sense of possibility tempered by the shadows of uncertainty. Aria stood on the bridge, gazing out at the vast expanse where stars shimmered like distant memories, each a reminder of the choices that had brought them here. This moment was not merely a pause, it was a turning point, a fragile balance between the known and the unknown. The decision to stand down had not come without cost. The murmurs of dissent among her crew still echoed in the recesses of her mind, a constant reminder that hope was often accompanied by doubt. They had walked a precarious line between peace and conflict, and now the consequences of their actions loomed larger than ever. Would they be seen as traitors to their own kind, or would they become pioneers of a new future? "Captain," a voice broke through her contemplation, pulling her from the depths of her thoughts. It was Thryel, his presence a steady anchor amidst the swirling uncertainty. "We've received a response from the Federation regarding our decision." Aria turned to face him, the weight of his gaze urging her to meet the moment head-on. "What did they say?" "They acknowledge our willingness to negotiate," he replied, the corners of his mouth hinting at a cautious optimism. "However, they demand further assurances of our intentions. The Federation is wary, and their trust has been shaken." She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Trust was a fragile commodity, easily fractured by the scars of the past. "And what are they proposing?" "They request a meeting," Thryel continued, his tone measured. "A chance to discuss terms face to face." Aria considered this. A meeting could open doors, but it could also expose vulnerabilities they couldn't afford to show. "What do you think? Should we accept?" "I believe we should," he replied, his expression resolute. "But we must prepare ourselves for any outcome. The stakes are higher than ever." A shiver of apprehension danced along her spine. As they prepared to meet the Federation, the potential for conflict still loomed like a dark cloud. Aria understood that the meeting would be a test, not only of their resolve, but of the fragile threads that bound their futures together. "Very well," she said, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Let's set up the details. We need to show them that we're committed to this path, no matter the cost." The day of the meeting arrived, and the Ghost Fleet floated in orbit around a nearby planet, its atmosphere swirling with a kaleidoscope of colors, a stunning yet humbling sight. Aria gathered her senior officers on the bridge, the mood tense but focused. Each face reflected the myriad emotions that coursed through their ranks: hope, fear, and a determination to forge a new path. As they prepared for the impending conversation with the Federation, Aria sensed the unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach. The stakes were impossibly high, and any misstep could lead to disaster. She cleared her throat, her voice steady despite the whirlwind within. "I want each of you to understand the significance of what we're about to do. This meeting is not just about us, it's about the future of our species." The officers exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement while others remained uncertain. "We have the opportunity to redefine our legacy," Aria continued. "But that requires trust, not just from the Federation but from each other." Thryel's gaze was fixed on her, an understanding passing between them. He stepped forward, his presence commanding. "We must be ready to face whatever the Federation brings to the table. They will test our resolve, our commitment to peace." As the crew members took their positions, the reality of their mission settled in. The ship's communication systems hummed to life, and Aria felt the weight of anticipation building. This was a moment of reckoning, and the outcome was still shrouded in uncertainty. The Federation ship arrived, a sleek vessel gliding through the void with a grace that belied its purpose. As the two ships drew closer, Aria's heart raced, each beat resonating with the gravity of their circumstances. She took a moment to collect her thoughts, drawing on the strength of those who had fought for a chance at peace. "Captain," her communications officer said, breaking through her reverie, "we're receiving a signal from the Federation. They're ready to begin." With a nod, Aria took her place at the center of the bridge. The flickering display projected the Federation's emblem, a stark reminder of the authority they represented. She felt a surge of determination wash over her, grounding her in the moment. "Let's proceed," she said, her voice steady. "And remember, this is our chance to change the course of our fates." The screen flickered, and Admiral Caller's stern visage filled the display. His expression was inscrutable, a mask of authority that belied the complexities beneath. "Captain Aria," he began, his voice resonating with a practiced calm. "You understand the gravity of this meeting." "I do, Admiral," Aria replied, meeting his gaze with a fierce resolve. "We seek a new path, a future defined by cooperation, not conflict." Caller's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing her words with an intensity that felt almost palpable. "Your willingness to stand down is commendable, but we need assurances that your actions reflect genuine intentions." Aria took a deep breath, knowing that every word mattered. "I understand your skepticism. Trust cannot be given lightly, especially after what has transpired. But I stand here today to demonstrate our commitment to peace, no matter the consequences." The Admiral remained silent for a moment, allowing the weight of her words to settle in the air. "What guarantees can you offer?" he finally asked, the challenge evident in his tone. "The only guarantee I can offer is my life," she stated, each syllable weighed with meaning. "If I betray this promise, I will accept whatever consequences come my way. My crew deserves a chance at a future, and I will not let them down." Caller's expression shifted, the corners of his mouth tightening in contemplation. "You would risk everything for a chance at peace?" "Absolutely," she affirmed, her voice unwavering. "We cannot continue to let fear dictate our actions. I've seen the cost of war firsthand, and it is a burden I refuse to pass on to another generation." A charged silence enveloped the bridge as Caller considered her words. The tension hung thick in the air, a precarious balance between hope and doubt. "Very well, Captain," he said finally, his tone measured. "We will entertain your proposal for peace. However, this must be a reciprocal commitment. We cannot move forward without establishing clear terms." Aria felt a flicker of hope spark within her, though she knew the path ahead would still be fraught with challenges. "What do you propose?" Caller outlined a series of terms, detailed agreements on resource sharing, the demilitarization of certain zones, and a framework for ongoing dialogue. Each point was a potential landmine, laden with the weight of history and fear. As the discussions progressed, Aria felt the dynamics shift. The initial tension began to thaw, replaced by a cautious willingness to engage. Calor's demeanor softened slightly as they navigated through the intricacies of their respective histories, revealing the nuances of their shared struggles. Aria took a moment to reflect on the fragile nature of trust. With each concession they made, she could sense the shadows of the past still lingering, a reminder of the scars that war had etched into their souls. Yet, amidst the complexities, she saw the potential for a brighter future. As the hours stretched on, the dialogue continued, weaving between hope and skepticism, a delicate dance of words. Aria felt herself growing more resolute with each passing moment, understanding that the path to peace required not only dialogue but genuine vulnerability. Thryel stood beside her, a steady presence, his gaze fixed on the screen as he absorbed the nuances of the discussions. "You're doing well," he murmured, the softness of his voice grounding her. "This is a crucial step." "I hope it's enough," Aria replied, her heart heavy with the knowledge that each choice would reverberate far beyond their immediate reality. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken bond tethering them together in this pivotal moment. There was a comfort in knowing they were not alone in this fight for a new future, but the stakes felt impossibly high. As the discussions reached a critical juncture, Calor's demeanor shifted once more. "There is one final condition," he stated, his voice tinged with gravity. "We must ensure that any alliance between our peoples is not contingent upon mere words. We need to see your commitment in action." Aria felt the air thicken with tension. "What do you propose?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. "We need to establish a joint task force," Calor replied, "a group that includes both your people and ours, working together to address the conflicts that arise. This task force will operate under a unified command, and its mission will be to oversee the demilitarization of contested zones." The proposal weighed heavily on her. While it held the promise of collaboration, it also meant surrendering a degree of autonomy, a potential threat to their independence. "And what if there are dissenting voices within our ranks? What assurance do we have that our people will accept this?" "We can only move forward with trust," Calor replied, his gaze unwavering. "This is a leap into the unknown for both our peoples, but if we wish to avoid the cycle of violence, we must take it together." Aria felt the enormity of the moment settle over her like a shroud. The Federation's offer was tempting yet fraught with implications she couldn't fully grasp. "I need time to consult with my crew," she said, her voice firm. Calor nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Take the time you need. But remember, peace is not merely the absence of war. It is the presence of mutual understanding." As the transmission ended, Aria felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. She turned to her officers, their faces a mixture of hope and trepidation. "What do we think? Is this a step forward or a potential trap?" Thryel was the first to respond. "It's a risk, but it could also be our opportunity to redefine how we interact with the Federation. If we don't take this step, we may find ourselves facing another war." There were murmurs of agreement and dissent among the crew, the discussions unfolding like a complex tapestry woven with the threads of fear and hope. Aria could see the struggle etched on their faces, the need for peace battling against the scars of the past. As the deliberations continued, Aria took a moment to step away from the crowd, seeking solace in the observation deck. The stars stretched out before her, a sea of infinite possibilities. It was in this solitude that she could feel the whispers of the universe, reminding her of the choices that shaped their destinies. "Is this really what we want?" she whispered to the cosmos, the question hanging in the air like an unfulfilled promise. "Can we truly carve a future worth having?" In that moment of reflection, Aria felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a cloak. The decisions they made would echo through time, shaping not just their lives but the generations that followed. Would they be remembered as harbingers of peace or as fools who gambled with their future? As the discussions wrapped up, the crew returned to their respective stations, the air thick with anticipation. Aria knew that the path ahead would not be easy, and the decision before them was laden with complexities that could not be ignored. The cost of peace would be steep, but the alternative was far more devastating. Captain Thryel's voice broke through her thoughts once more. The crew is anxious for your direction. They're waiting for your thoughts on Calor's proposal. Aria took a deep breath, steadying herself for what lay ahead. Gather everyone in the main hall. It's time we face this together. As they assembled, she stood at the front, their collective gaze fixed on her. The faces that looked back were a mosaic of hope, fear, and a shared desire for change. Each one had their own story, their own reasons for fighting, and she felt the enormity of their collective dreams pressing down upon her. This is a pivotal moment for us, Aria began, her voice steady. We've been given a chance to forge a new path, but it will require our trust, not just in the Federation but in each other. She could see the uncertainty lingering in their eyes, the flickering doubt that threatened to undermine their resolve. I know many of you are wary of entering into an alliance that may feel like surrender, but consider what we stand to gain: a future without the constant specter of conflict, a chance to redefine who we are. The murmurs grew, a chorus of mixed opinions filling the room. What if they betray us? One crew member called out. What if this is just another trap? Every choice carries risk, Aria replied, her gaze sweeping over the assembled crew. But if we don't take this leap, we may find ourselves trapped in an endless cycle of violence. We must ask ourselves what we truly desire: a chance at peace or a continuation of war. The discussion intensified, emotions running high as they weighed the implications of Calor's proposal. Aria felt the tension in the air, each heartbeat a reminder of the stakes involved. The conversation became a living entity, a reflection of the struggles that lay within each of them. In the midst of the deliberations, Thryel stepped forward, his voice rising above the clamor. What we are facing is not merely an external conflict, it is an internal one as well. Each of us carries the weight of our past decisions. We must be willing to confront those shadows if we wish to step into the light. His words resonated deeply, striking a chord within Aria. They were not just fighting against the Federation. They were battling the ghosts of their history, the echoes of choices that had led them to this precipice. The struggle for peace was not merely external. It demanded introspection and growth. As the discussion unfolded, Aria felt a sense of clarity begin to emerge. This was not just about choosing peace or war. It was about understanding what they stood for as a people, what it meant to be human in a universe filled with conflict. With renewed resolve, she spoke again. I want each of you to reflect on what it means to stand here today. This is our opportunity to reshape our legacy. We can either continue down the path of destruction, or we can choose to be architects of a new future. The silence that followed felt charged, each individual grappling with the weight of her words. Slowly, nods of agreement began to ripple through the crowd, a tentative but powerful shift in their collective mindset. As the meeting drew to a close, Aria felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with trepidation. They had taken a step toward unity, toward something larger than themselves. But the road ahead remained fraught with challenges, and the cost of peace would demand sacrifices that none of them could foresee. Prepare for our next move, Aria instructed her crew, a sense of urgency threading through her words. We'll need to be ready for anything as we move forward with negotiations. As the crew dispersed, Thryel lingered by her side, his expression thoughtful. You've done well, Aria. I sense a shift among them. They're beginning to understand the importance of this moment. I hope so, she replied, her gaze turning back to the stars. But the journey is far from over. We have much work ahead. With that, they fell into a comfortable silence, the hum of the ship enveloping them as they contemplated the weight of their choices. Outside, the stars continued to twinkle, each one a reminder of the mysteries that lay beyond their understanding. As they prepared to take the next steps toward peace, Aria knew that the universe held secrets yet to be uncovered, lessons that would shape their future in ways they could not yet imagine. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was a journey worth embarking upon, one that could redefine what it meant to be human. In that moment of reflection, she realized that the true battle was not just against the Federation, but within themselves, a quest to reconcile their past with a future they desired. With Thryel by her side, she felt the flickers of hope ignite once more, a promise of what could be if they dared to dream. As the ship moved through the cosmos, they prepared to face whatever awaited them, both in the universe and within their hearts. The journey was just beginning, and the choices they made would echo through the stars for generations to come. In the quiet confines of the Hope's horizon, Aria found herself confronting a reality that seemed heavier than the ship itself. The soft hum of machinery surrounded her, a constant reminder of their journey through the vastness of space. It was a refuge, yet it felt like a cage, each heartbeat echoing with the decisions she had made, decisions that rippled through the lives of her crew and the remnants of humanity. Gathering her remaining soldiers felt necessary but daunting. The air in the briefing room was thick with unresolved tension, each face turned toward her revealing a spectrum of emotions, hope, skepticism, and a lingering bitterness that refused to fade. Aria inhaled deeply, preparing herself to face their scrutiny, aware that leadership often meant carrying not only her burdens, but theirs as well. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "I know the last few days have been challenging. The decision to pursue peace rather than war has raised questions I'm here to discuss." Gabriel's allies, those who had fought bravely alongside him, exchanged glances. Their expressions held a mixture of admiration and distrust, the echoes of past battles still fresh in their minds. Among them, Ava, a sharpshooter with a history of loss, spoke first. "You want us to believe in a future where we can coexist with the Federation, after everything they've done?" The room went quiet, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Aria felt the pull of resentment, the rawness of their wounds. "I understand your anger. We've lost so much. But isn't it time we sought something beyond survival?" "Survival is all we've known," snapped Jace, his voice trembling with pent-up emotion. "And we've fought for our right to exist, to claim our place in this universe. What good is peace if it's built on the ruins of our honor?" Aria's heart ached at the desperation in his tone. "Peace doesn't erase our past. It allows us to create a future where we are not defined by our losses. But that future requires trust, a trust that we can rebuild." "Trust?" Ava echoed, her eyes narrowing. "You think they will trust us? Look at what they've done. They've turned entire worlds into ashes. What makes you think they'll treat us any differently?" Aria took a moment to gather her thoughts, grappling with the enormity of the conversation. Trust is a two-way street. If we want them to see us as more than just remnants of a defeated race, we must extend the hand of cooperation. Otherwise, we remain trapped in a cycle of violence. But the lingering resentment in the room was palpable. Each soldier carried their scars, an invisible burden that shaped their perspective. They were not just allies, they were the embodiment of their shared history, a tapestry woven with threads of loss and survival. "Have you ever wondered if we're even capable of peace?" Jace pressed, his voice lowering as if afraid to voice the question. "After all we've endured, can we really be trusted to forge a new path? Or will we slip back into old habits the moment it's convenient?" Aria's gaze dropped to the floor, her thoughts swirling. This was not merely about her decision, it was about their collective identity. "We are shaped by our past, yes, but we have the power to redefine our future. I've seen what humanity is capable of: kindness, courage, resilience. We can use those strengths to build something better." Ava's voice softened, though the bitterness remained. "But at what cost? How many more sacrifices must we endure before we're free? This choice you're making feels like a surrender to me, and it makes me question everything we've fought for." Aria sensed the walls around her heart tightening. "It's not surrender. It's a chance to transform our survival into something meaningful. If we choose to fight again, it won't be for honor, it will be for vengeance. And vengeance only leads to more bloodshed." The silence that followed was thick with contemplation. Aria's gaze shifted to the window, where distant stars flickered like silent witnesses to their struggles. Each pinprick of light represented a possibility, a future yet unwritten. Yet, in that vast expanse, shadows loomed, unseen threats waiting to disrupt their fragile hopes. In that moment, she allowed herself to delve deeper into her own thoughts, exploring the philosophical questions that had plagued her since the decision to seek peace. Was this choice the right one? The fear of making the wrong call gnawed at her insides like a persistent ache. If peace is just a fleeting illusion, she pondered silently, what then? Are we doomed to repeat our mistakes, forever chasing a dream that may never exist? Gabriel had once believed that humanity could carve out a space in the cosmos, one where they weren't merely surviving but thriving. He had embodied hope, a beacon of light in the darkest times. His absence echoed loudly now, a reminder of the sacrifices that led them to this precipice. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of the ship's intercom. Captain Aria, Thryel's voice came through, steady and calm. We have detected an anomalous signal from deep space. It appears to be a distress signal, but the source is unidentifiable. Aria felt her heart quicken. What are the coordinates? Approximately 3 light-years from our current position. The signal is repeating, though the origin remains unknown. Patch it through to the main screen, she ordered, her voice steadying as adrenaline surged through her. This was the moment they had been waiting for, a chance to shift their focus from internal strife to the unknown. Perhaps this signal was an opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to cooperation, a chance to act rather than dwell on their doubts. As the image flickered to life, a distorted waveform appeared, pulsing in time with the distress call. The static was thick, but beneath it, they could hear fragments of words, a plea for help laced with fear. Please, help. They're coming. The soldiers turned to Aria, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity in their eyes. The atmosphere shifted, the weight of their previous discussions temporarily lifted by this new challenge. The possibilities unfurled like petals, revealing the potential for action, for connection. Prepare the ship for immediate departure, Aria commanded, the urgency in her voice rekindling their sense of purpose. We need to investigate this signal. If there are others in danger, we cannot ignore them. Not again. Jace's earlier doubts still flickered behind his gaze, but now there was something else, determination. What if it's a trap, he asked, his tone questioning yet edged with a newfound resolve. Then we'll deal with it together, Aria replied, her voice firm. This is our chance to prove that we're more than just survivors. We're a community, and communities rise or fall together. With a nod of agreement, the soldiers began moving with purpose, their earlier resentment set aside as they shifted into action. The camaraderie that had been strained moments before now felt palpable, a renewed bond forged in the face of uncertainty. As they worked to prepare the ship, Aria felt the weight of her decisions lighten slightly. Maybe this was what they needed, a shared goal that transcended their individual doubts. As they approached the coordinates of the signal, the atmosphere aboard the Hope's horizon shifted once more. The ship's lights the control room, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the vast darkness outside. Aria stood at the helm, flanked by Thryel and Ava, her gaze fixed on the view screen, anticipation mixing with apprehension. Visual on the source of the signal, Thryel announced, bringing up the display. A small, battered vessel appeared before them, drifting aimlessly through space. Its hull was scarred and worn, evidence of a struggle, perhaps a desperate flight from something terrible. Scan for life signs, Aria instructed, her heart racing. The echo of the distress signal still reverberated in her mind, a haunting reminder of vulnerability. Reading minimal life signs aboard, Thryel replied, his brow furrowing. It appears there are survivors, but their condition is uncertain. Prepare for boarding, Aria commanded. If we can help them, we must. It's our responsibility. As they docked and prepared to disembark, the weight of their earlier discussions resurfaced. Would this encounter challenge their perceptions of peace further, or would it reinforce their commitment to it? The unknown was both thrilling and terrifying, a reflection of the journey they were on together. Stepping into the damaged vessel, Aria felt the cold grip of fear tighten around her. The interior was dimly lit, shadows lurking in every corner. She motioned for her crew to stay close, their breath echoing softly in the silence. As they moved deeper into the ship, the air felt heavy with the remnants of despair, memories of conflict and loss that had led to this moment. In a small chamber, they found the survivors huddled together, 3 individuals, gaunt and wide-eyed, clinging to each other as if their very lives depended on it. Aria knelt down, her heart aching at the sight. "We're here to help," she said softly, trying to convey warmth amidst the fear. One of the survivors, a woman with dark hair and dirt-streaked skin, looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They destroyed our world. We barely escaped." Aria stood still, the weight of silence heavier than any battle she'd faced. The star-filled void stretched infinitely before her, mocking the notion of boundaries or finality. The shimmering constellations, once symbols of humanity's unrelenting conquest, now seemed distant and unattainable, a reminder that even in victory, uncertainty lingered. She had thought that peace, fragile as it was, could hold. She had believed it. Yet the message from Thryel had shaken that conviction. His words still echoed in her mind, planting doubts she couldn't dismiss. "There are forces beyond your sight," he had warned. "Forces that care little for the peace you cherish." Aria gazed out into the stars, her reflection merging with the streaks of distant light. The horizon felt impossibly close and far, like a dream that danced just beyond reach. What lay beyond? She knew they were about to step into unknown territories once more. But the real question was whether they were truly ready for it. Were they ever? The crew moved quietly behind her, their voices a low hum in the background. Yet the weight of the moment lay with Aria alone. She clenched the railing, feeling the cold metal bite into her palms, grounding her. Jace approached, his footsteps slow, careful not to disrupt her thoughts. She sensed him long before he spoke, his presence familiar, like an old scar that never fully healed. There was a pause between them, a silence that, for once, felt neither tense nor strained. "You're thinking too hard," Jace muttered, coming to stand beside her. He leaned against the railing, following her gaze toward the stars. "I know that look." Aria let out a quiet breath. "Do you think peace can last, Jace? Or is it inevitable that we fall back into war?" Jace frowned, rubbing his neck as if the question was physically uncomfortable. "You want the truth, or should I lie to make you feel better?" "Truth," she replied, her voice steady, though the weight behind her request was anything but. He sighed, shaking his head. "Peace is a battle, same as war. Maybe harder. With war, you know who your enemies are, what you're fighting for. But peace, it's like standing in the dark, hoping no one's going to take a shot at you. And odds are, someone always does." He turned to face her, his expression unusually soft. "Doesn't mean it's not worth trying, though." Aria's eyes remained on the stars. She hadn't expected Jace to have the answer, but somehow his honesty grounded her. "I just wonder if we're capable of it," she murmured. "Humans. We've always fought, since the beginning." Jace shrugged. "Maybe. But we've also learned, grown, survived things we never should have. If anything, we're damn good at adapting." There was a truth to his words. Humanity had survived destruction, loss, and countless betrayals. Yet they had also built, created, and hoped, despite it all. Was that enough? Thryel's voice interrupted her thoughts, his presence suddenly tangible over the comms. "Aria, a word?" She glanced at Jace, who gave her a small nod before turning away, giving her the space she needed. Aria tapped her earpiece, walking toward a quieter corner of the ship. Thryel's voice was calm, measured, as always. "You're troubled," Thryel began. It wasn't a question. Thryel, despite his alien origins, had developed an uncanny ability to sense her emotions. Perhaps it was the shared experiences, or perhaps it was his unique ability to see the flaws in human nature so clearly. Either way, Aria found herself both irritated and comforted by it. "Peace feels like an illusion," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. like a thin veil we've placed over a chaos we can't control. Thryel's response was deliberate, careful. Peace is not a guarantee, Aria, nor is it something that can be sustained without effort. It requires more than victory in battle. It requires discipline, patience, and faith. Faith? She scoffed lightly, her skepticism evident. In what? In yourselves, he replied without hesitation. In your capacity to choose something greater than conflict, to choose creation over destruction. Aria paused. The idea of faith had always seemed abstract, too intangible to hold on to when faced with real threats. But standing here, on the cusp of a new chapter for humanity, the concept didn't seem as foreign as it once had. Perhaps it was time for humanity to believe in something more than just their ability to fight. You think we're capable of that? She asked, her voice softening, a trace of doubt lingering. I do, because I have seen it, Thryel said. I've watched you lead your people, making choices not out of fear, but hope. That is the true essence of peace, choosing not because it's easy, but because it's right. Aria let his words settle. She had made decisions, difficult ones. Some had led to pain, others to moments of fragile tranquility. Was that all peace was? A series of difficult choices made in the hope of something better. I wish I had your certainty, Aria confessed, more to herself than to him. Thryel's voice held a trace of warmth, a rarity. It is not certainty, Aria. It is hope. And hope, fragile as it may be, is what will sustain you. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to breathe. The weight of command, the pressure of leading humanity, had often been suffocating. But in this moment, she felt a small flicker of relief. Not certainty, but hope, hope that they could choose something more. Thryel's voice softened further, almost as if he were hesitant to speak the next words. Aria, you are not alone in this. I may not be human, but I understand the burden of leadership. And I consider you a friend. Aria blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Thryel, the ever-stoic, ever-logical alien, had never spoken in such personal terms. It was a strange comfort, knowing that he, despite their differences, saw her as something more than just a leader. Thank you, she said quietly. I consider you one too. There was a pause on the other end, as if Thryel was processing her response. Then, his voice returned, steady but laced with something almost human. We are all trying, Aria, trying to be better than we were. A silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a shared understanding, a recognition of the struggle they both faced. As the conversation ended, Aria found herself looking back out at the stars, her thoughts no longer as turbulent. She had accepted the uncertainty. Conflict might always be a possibility, but the choice to strive for peace was theirs to make, again and again. The door behind her slid open, and she turned to find Jace waiting, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Did Thryel give you some cosmic wisdom? He teased lightly. Aria smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Something like that. Jace stepped forward, standing beside her once more. They both looked out at the stars, the silence between them filled with unspoken thoughts. You know, Jace began after a long pause, no one's asking you to be perfect. Peace isn't about getting everything right. It's about trying, even when you know it might fail. Aria nodded slowly. I just wonder if we're choosing peace because we're afraid of what happens if we don't. Jace looked at her, his eyes searching hers. Maybe, but fear isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's what keeps us from doing something stupid. She laughed softly, the tension easing just a fraction. That's one way to look at it. They stood there for a long time, the vastness of space a constant reminder of how small they were. And yet, in that moment, Aria felt something shift within her. The doubt still lingered, the uncertainty remained, but there was a quiet resolve now, a determination to keep trying, no matter the odds. We've come so far, she said quietly, but there's still so much we don't know. Jace nodded. There always will be. But that's what makes it worth it, right? The not knowing. Aria looked at him, surprised by the simplicity of his words. And yet, there was wisdom there. Yeah, she agreed, that's what makes it worth it. The stars stretched out before them, a vast unknown horizon filled with possibility, danger, and perhaps hope. Aria's hand tightened on the railing, and she took a deep breath. We may be machines of war, she murmured, but we choose what we become. Jace glanced at her, his expression softening, but he said nothing. There was nothing more to say. As the ship prepared for its next journey, Aria turned her gaze forward, toward the stars and the endless horizon beyond. Peace was not a guarantee, but it was a choice they would continue to make, again and again.